Good evening, everyone. Mr. Bigham, Mr. Hahn, fellow board members. At this time, I would like to call the Bloom Carroll Local School District Board of Education meeting on July 13th, 2020. Mr. Bigham, if you would please do roll call.
Mr. Abbott?
Present.
Mr. Bratton?
Present.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Present.
Mrs. Sherman?
Present.
Number 3, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 4, the approval of agenda. As you know, you should have had an addendum sent to you today. There's a couple items on there. The first one being 9C 5B. Dave Anders, JV Girls Soccer. We need to put that 80% in there. Group C, experience 22. The next one being 9C 5DD. Bethany Winkler, JV Soccer, 20%, Group C, experience 0. Then under 10D, this language will actually replace the language that was before on our agenda that was sent out on Thursday. As seen right there, the discussion of instructional status is identified in the BC Rest and Restart Education Safety Plan, number 1 through number 2 presented. Any questions? All right, may I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Abbott, second by Mr. Matt Bratton. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes. Number 5, approve the minutes from the following meetings. A, June 8th, 2020, regular meeting. B, June 24th, 2020, regular meeting. Did anyone see any corrections that we need to make?
I did not. I looked through them. I did not see them.
I did not as well. All right. May I get a motion, please?
I'll second.
Motion made by Mr. Jimmy Johnson, second by Mr. Abbott. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
And Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes. Number 6, public participation. A citizen granted permission to address the board shall speak no longer than 3 minutes at one time, except by consent of the majority of the board members present. A maximum of 30 minutes of public participation may be permitted at each meeting. The Bloom Carroll Board of Education policy requires the individual's name not be used as part of a complaint or concern being stated to the board during the public participation part of the agenda. The board rests in its president the authority to terminate any remarks which may be defamatory, abusive, or otherwise cause undue interruption or interference with the orderly conduct of business. For those of you that have signed up and would like to participate, we will need your name on here to keep for record. We will start this here at 6:04, and we will conclude at 6:34. If any of you have any other questions or concerns, please, feel free to reach out to the board members or also to reach out to Mr. Hahn if you have any questions or concerns. At this time, it is, I've got one name, so you are up. It's Mr. Mills.
Administrator, Board of Education, I'm glad that you're in your position and I'm in mine. Tonight for sure. Okay. I know you have to make difficult decisions tonight. My concern is about busing. The Ohio Revised Code said that students 9 through 12 don't have to be bused to school. And students within students within 2 miles of their building do not have to be bused. This might enable the district to get students to school with a reduced bus load, figuring that you can't put as many students on a bus with the coronavirus as it is. And of course, I have other ideas for tonight too, which you probably don't want to hear. But anyway, knowing that you might have to go only several days a week, you might need 1 keep a day for cleaning up the place. I don't mean that it will be dirty, I just mean that it may not be as safe as it could be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Number 7, treasurer's recommendations and reports.
Thank you. Item 7A is to approve the June financial statements for a total expense of $11,231,623.47. Of that, $7.65 million in SCOIC expenses. Since we ended the fiscal year in June, all of the information that needs presented and summarized is included in item B. So at this time, we'll just open it up to any questions on the financial statements or the checks during the month.
Hearing no other questions, may I get a motion, please? Motion made by Mr. Bratton, second by Mr. Jimmy Johnson. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson? Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
And Mr. Rod Johnson.
Yes.
Item B is to approve the fiscal year 2020 financial summary report. You have this in your packet. The electronic version starts on page 34. As is customary, when we end the fiscal year, we look at our general fund, both from an operating revenue and an operating expenditure standpoint. To put it as simply as we can, we look at revenues, expenditures, and how do we do in terms of either a budget surplus or a budget deficit. As we ended the fiscal year, we did have an operating surplus of almost $291,000, meaning we're adding that much to our carryover. Obviously, it didn't start off and didn't end up the way we thought it would. We were a little more favorable than looking at the projected in the November 5-year, which I think is important from an accountability standpoint to go back and look at the original forecast and be able to explain to the public and the board where are the large discrepancies. You better be able to explain if certain numbers or certain collections are significantly higher, significantly lower. So that's our attachment point as we look at the ending up fiscal year 2020. Our operating revenues increased by a little over 4%, and our operating expenditures we were able to hold down to only a 2% increase. So certainly that was certainly a goal, providing as much, obviously, whatever our students and staff need, but still with the fiscal stewardship as part of our goals and vision. Carryover as of June 30th, $3,773,580. You can look at the carryover, kind of the financial health, if you call it, in two different ways: percent of total budget and how many true days cash you have. So if we didn't collect any money, how long could we last? Normally 2 months. 70 days is a pretty good benchmark. 20% in terms of being able to cover 20% of your budget with your carryover is also a good benchmark, and you can see where we fall in there. We're getting closer, but I think we're in a good spot moving forward, especially with a lot of the uncertainties. I won't go through these graphs. These are more just how are we, this is on the report card, the local report card, how much of our money is going directly into instruction, 56%. We have some other areas that we invest in as well. And then we look at our salaries, wages, fringe benefits, almost a little over 70%. That's always going to be the case with school finance. As we go forward, and please, if there's any questions or comments, please interrupt me. I don't want to get too long-winded here, but we've looked at this before. The next 2 pages are just a breakdown of the changes in revenues and expenditures, both from a year-to-year difference percentage, and then again from that accountability standpoint, how did it compare to that original November forecast? A positive percentage here and a positive amount obviously means we collected more than what we forecasted. And we've talked about this, so I won't go through this again with our real estate tax, our income tax collections. And obviously we had a $434,000 state funding cut in the last 45 days of the fiscal year. So those numbers are borne out here. For the year, we collected 1.44% more in revenues, or a little over $303,000 as of June 30th.
Mr. Bigham?
Yes.
As far as real estate tax, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but has the county gave us any sort of indication what to expect moving forward with everything that's going on?
No, we're our second half collections we will receive late July, early August, so we should know a little more in terms of if there's any delinquencies. Right. Moving forward, going into next year, I'm not sure. what we'll see because of all the extenuating factors. So we'll certainly keep the board informed. From an expenditure standpoint, again, it's just the opposite. If it's a negative, we actually were under budget in that category. We were pretty close, really, and we were a little over in purchase services and retirement, health insurance. This $90,000 you'll see on the agenda in a couple of items. We had to transfer out money to the food service fund. Certainly, we were not anticipating that in November. So that's a big part of this bottom line being over budget by 0.17%, or a little over $35,000. Again, 2% difference from the prior year. Last two pages are just a culmination of information, a summary of questions and information that I received the most requests on throughout the year. Page 37, the electronic copy, shows how many students we have coming in open enrollment, how many students we have going out, and then how many students we have leaving via community schools, as also special education scholarship, meaning these students are attending and getting their education elsewhere at full funding from Bloom Carroll School District. As you can see, as our space dwindles with the, I'll scroll on here real fast, but as the space dwindles here with the open enrollment, we are now down to 45 net. You can see the number in has decreased. The number out has increased a little bit. We're at 45 net, and you can see what that translates into. It's a little over $679,000 we generate from open enrollment in, with $362,000 going the other way. The community school population has decreased a little bit, but again, that's at total our expense with 31 students going out. And then the special education scholarships and the Ed Choice has expanded throughout Ohio, and it's prevalent in our school district as well. So we have 15, again, at our expense totally. If you look at the net 45 in open enrollment, and then you look at a negative 31 and negative 15, we're actually one student more leaving the district than we are open enrollment coming in. So I think that's important to be cognizant of from a student enrollment standpoint. And then finally, again, to keep complete transparency with the permanent improvement levy, to make sure that we're completely transparent and succinct with our summaries on how we were spending the permanent improvement levy that we were fortunate enough for the community to support us on. For fiscal year 20, we spent $319,672. And of that, you can see in the areas of bus replacement, helping our maintenance from an equipment standpoint, repairs and safety improvements to our buildings, technology and paving. That's how it breaks down from a broader scope standpoint. The cash balance at 6/30/20 is a little over $350,000, which is about 75% of a year's worth of collection. So as we had planned, we've got about a year's worth in our permanent improvement fund that certainly we'll have for anything that becomes a safety issue or an improvement issue. Lastly, real quick, we have now updated the safety and protective, the PPE equipment. We're up to a little over $12,000 now that we've spent with these in these areas. Again, PPE and cleaning equipment, and then again adding in the unemployment as well as the food service transfer to show that there is an investment that we're making as we move through this COVID and making sure we're providing the safest environment possible. Any questions on B?
Is that going on capital?
No. The new CARES Act fund does provide a provision to pay for these items, but we haven't gotten to that point where we're ready to spend those funds, so that's coming right out of our general fund at this point.
All right, quick question about the community schools, those 31 kids. Are most of those online kids?
Yes, I'd say 90%.
Will be offering an option, do you think we'll?
It's possible. I'd say 90% of those kids are online, and the other 10 are actually attending a brick and mortar.
So that 215, we could possibly.
Absolutely.
Some of that.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Mr. Meeting, one comment, couple questions. 0.17 of the budget, in my opinion, is amazing. In the private sector where I come from, if you hit that, you're unbelievable. But my question is really around the state foundation. I know this current year we were down $401,000.
I think you projected, or they told you to project next year, 20% cut in that amount. So is that still, I think you updated us on that last time, has there been any changes?
Okay, two things. Yeah, good question. I project, this is an 8% cut. It's a little different there, but the total that they cut at the end of the fiscal year was a little over 8%. I had projected another 12% for this coming year, meaning a total of 20 from where we originally were.
From the 5 points.
Exactly. So a
An
total,
additional 12
again, exactly.
projected.
To this point, we just received our first state payment last Friday, and it's still at the level that we ended last fiscal year. It's still at that 8% cut. So at this point, we're still at the 8%, but they told us that could change.
Travis, could you put 12% for everybody that's here into perspective, what that means from our state aid?
Well, the 20% total is about $1 million. So it's a fifth. It's a fifth of what our original, just at this time last year, that we were projected to get from the state. So
Would be another 600,000.
exactly, it'd be another
That's what we're
600,000.
looking at possibly not
Next,
Yes.
another 600,000.
Yes. So a total.
215 back to health.
Right. And really, you know, we were able to save a little bit for the sub costs and transportation that we talked about, but this is the longer term effect that could impact us much more than some of these short term savings or short term PPE expenses. This is the big area, and the taxes as well.
Income tax is still in the budget.
And the income, exactly, our first collection for fiscal 21 is in a couple of weeks, which will encompass April through June, which should give us a pretty good indication of where we're going, at least for the next 3 or 4 collections, income tax wise.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Bigham? Hearing none, may I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Sherman, seconded by Mr. Jimmy Johnson. Mr. Bigham?
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Item C, approve increasing the substitute rate to $91. It's currently $85, beginning with the first day of substitute employment, effective with the 2021 school year. Currently, we are at $85 for the first 20 days of sub teacher. Once the sub teacher hits 21 days, has an incentive to stay with us. They're at 91 already. So this would only be an increase of $6 for the first 20 days. It's a minimal investment. I know Mr. Hahn had some conversations with some subs, and with all the uncertainty and the difficulty in getting subs as it is, we feel like this puts us maybe in a little better position to attract subs that will be sorely needed, I'm sure.
So that rate will just stay the same.
Yes. Yep.
Makes sense. Under current conditions. Any other questions? Hearing none, may I get a motion, please? So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Bratton, seconded by Mrs. Sherman. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
And Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
And finally, we have approved the following fund-to-fund transfer from the general fund to our food service fund in the amount of $90,000. We've spoken about this plenty. This gets us into fiscal 21 with a positive balance. Any transfer from fund to fund requires board approval.
Any questions? I will go ahead and make the motion. Motion made by Mr. Rod Johnson, seconded by Mr. Bratton. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Bigham. Number 8, old business. Approve the following policies for a second reading. Number 1 through 2 is as seen here. Any questions in regards to these? Hearing none, may I get a motion, please?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Bratton, seconded by Mrs. Sherman. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
All right.
Number 9, superintendent's recommendations and reports. Mr. Hahn.
Okay, well, it's been pretty quiet, not a whole lot going on. I wish usually in July I can say that at a district like Bloom Carroll, but times are different. We've got a lot going on. Try to give you a few updates and keep things moving to what I know everybody's really here for tonight. From the athletic department, I provided a handout for you. I'll just kind of hit some of the highlights of that. They were scheduled to be here. There was a conflict tonight, and they were not able to be here. But just so you know where we stand with sports, obviously the winter sports tournament season back in March, girls basketball, boys basketball, that was all canceled by Ohio High School Athletic Association. And for the school year, the athletic department was in good shape. It had been since the 1980s, since we had won the Mid-State League All-Sport Champs, and you get points based upon how all your athletic teams finish, how your varsity teams finish in the league. And we were at the point where things were shut down and spring sports were canceled. We were really in shape to have a position to hang on and win that Mid-State League Sports Championship. So just another example of some lost opportunities from the pandemic this past spring. The athletic department, even during the school closure order, the Ohio Department of Health allowed some exceptions to do individual skills training with student athletes, and there were exceptions in those orders, and we did allow that outside and some inside once we got through 3 different phases where there were a lot of health checks or screenings and assessments. Each day, kids were kept in their same group, but we've had a lot of students participate in that. Mr. Little met with all the coaches. We had just shy of about 70 coaches that participated in a meeting to prepare for that when it took place in June, and we still have some of that going on. I just mentioned about the 3 phases. We just ended the 3rd phase, but with the increase with Fairfield County and the restrictions placed on Fairfield County as of last week, we've continued to stay in phase 3 with the hope that Ohio High School Athletic Association will be, my understanding is there's a meeting this week on the 16th to discuss fall sports, and we should have more direction about the fall athletic season, which typically begins August 1st for grades 7 through 12. So we just don't know yet, but there's a lot of parents and student athletes that really have a passion for many things, including our performing arts programs and athletic programs, and I know how badly they want to do that, and we hope that there's a chance that they can somehow find a way to do that safely with the guidance of Ohio High School Athletic Association. We only have 1 new coach. We're hiring some coaches this evening on the agenda for fall sports. You'll see that. And Mr. Little wanted me to point out that this fall marks the 9th season for our artificial turf field that was put in by the Board of Education with the passage of the 2009 bond issue. And the initial plan was to get 10 years out of the field, and all indicators seem to indicate that we will make that happen and probably get a few more, but we need to start putting it on the radar. Hopefully when the economy and financial revenue to the state that gets kicked back to the schools continues to improve, that we may have to put that on our radar. Our turf gets used daily by our kids. We do not have green space on this 40 acres. The only green space we have is an arboretum and a baseball and softball field. But when you have marching band and soccer and football and everybody else using that, and even youth programs, that turf wears down pretty quickly. But I'm just kind of putting that on your radar long term, that it might be something that we're going to have to watch. So that's an update from the athletic department. Construction update. We remain on schedule with the K-5 elementary school being built at this time on Carroll Eastern Road. Right now, a lot of masonry block is still ongoing, being erected, and the trusses were put on the what would be the K2 area of the building, and they're continuing to run pipe and mechanical, all the electrical and plumbing, working with the subcontractors on that. Again, it's targeted for April, which is still the spring of 21. It'll open to students in August of 2021. And we are getting closer to getting a definite cost on the increase for the fire pump and the generator, so I'll keep the board updated on that. In terms of summer maintenance here, you know, we've been working, our maintenance crew, Dennis Thompson is our maintenance supervisor. He came on and replaced a gentleman, John Pugh, that had been with us for over 40 years. Dennis started last November, I believe, and he's walked into a very difficult situation in terms of how much we rely upon him with the maintenance and health and cleaning and sanitizing of these buildings. And he's done a great job getting them ready. They're ahead of schedule. The high school roof top coat that we're putting on along the second floor of the high school, that is wrapping up. But Dennis has done a good job. The parking lots have been sealed. The classrooms have been thoroughly cleaned, stripped, waxed, sanitized, and he will continue preparations for some type of school year. The school reopening update, we're going to get into that quite a bit, but Governor DeWine and the state finally came out with some guidance. The main thing about it is that they focus on, the main principles are assessing for symptoms, washing and sanitizing hands during the day, cleaning and sanitizing surfaces, practicing social distancing as much as possible. And there's different organizations, such as credible organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, that will suggest for children 3 feet might be appropriate, but most of the Ohio Department of Health and the CDC stays with 6 foot guidelines as much as possible. And then facial coverings to develop policies. Obviously, Ohio has their own requirements for K-12 education for staff, and they also have a system with the Ohio Public Health Advisory System. If you're in a level 3, they require masks in public places, and there are some exceptions that do apply. I'll get into some of the data maybe later as we get into this, as we have a discussion area on the pandemic and how it's impacting schools and things to consider. But that's kind of a few things that I wanted to update the Board of Education on. So any questions about the update?
No.
Okay, let's move on to 9B, students and programs. Approve the 2020-21 fees for the following classes as presented. Agenda item A for the high school, 1 through 19. B at the middle school, no increases in any of these fees from last year. 1 through 4 for 5th grade to 8th grade. Agenda item C, intermediate school, still $40. That includes supplies and technology fees. Primary school, $30 for the year. Number 2, approve the following cafeteria prices for the 2020-21 school year. This is no increase in fees from last year. For breakfast, $1.25 for students, $1.50 for adults. Lunch for grades K to 8 is $2.90. In grades 9 through 12 and adults would be $3. Under students and programs, 9B3, approve the purchase of the Jefferson County Virtual Learning Academy curriculum for the 2021 school year. Number 4, approve waiving the Bloom Care Local School District student-athlete academic eligibility requirements for the start of the 2021 fall athletic season as a result of the impact of the pandemic per Ohio High School Athletic temporary eligibility bylaw changes, with the exception of the Ohio High School Athletic Association residency requirements and Bloom Care Local School District student-athlete disciplinary requirements. Obviously, due to the pandemic, students in the fall of 7th grade are typically all eligible, and all the other grades they have to pass 5 classes. There's been changes at the Ohio High School level, and because of the pandemic and the remote learning that took place during the spring, because they always use the previous grading period, so the 4th quarter of the 1920 school year is what's used to determine eligibility for athletes in August 1st, as of August 1st, 2020. They waived those eligibility requirements. We have our own eligibility requirements as well, and it does not waive any residency requirements or disciplinary. If there's any discipline from last year that needs to be served, those students are not eligible. They have to fulfill their discipline consequence, but from an academic standpoint, it allows students to get a fresh start, hopefully, for this upcoming school year. So based upon Ohio High School bylaws and the temporary change, I felt that it was appropriate to extend that to our student athletes too in this situation. And number 5, approve amending the dates of the Spanish Club Costa Rica trip to April 2nd through 10th, 2021, pending receipt of amended trip itinerary and contract.
Mr. Hahn, going back to number 3 in the Virtual Learning Academy, I know we'll be talking a little bit about this and going back and doing our restart plan, but are you gonna save to talk about that a little more in depth then?
I will.
Okay, perfect, I don't want to
Yeah.
make you repeat.
Yeah.
Any questions? Hearing none, I will go ahead and make the motion.
I will second that.
Motion made by Mr. Rod Johnson, second by Mr. Abbott. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Rod Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman,
Yes.
Okay, 9C, number 1, approve the employment of Stone Scott as a 5th grade teacher on an initial sequence 1-year limited contract at step 0 with a bachelor's degree for the 2021 school year, pending timely receipt of verifications and background checks effective August 17th. And that is to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Abby Love and reassignment of the position to 5th grade to meet the staffing needs of the district. Number 2, approve the employment of Amanda Jablonski as an elementary school counselor, social worker on an initial sequence 1-year limited contract at step 0 with a master's degree for the 2021 school year, pending timely receipt of verifications and background checks effective August 17th, 2020. That is to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Maggie Connor. Number 3, approve the employment of Suzanne Brustel as a 5.25-hour-a-day bus driver on a 1-year limited contract at step 12, effective August 17th, 2020, to fill the vacancy created by the retirement resignation of Charles McGiffin. Number 4, approve the following OTES, Ohio Teacher Evaluation System evaluators for the 2021 school year as presented A through F. Number 5, approve the following fall athletic supplemental contracts for the 2021 school year, pending receipt of verifications and background checks, and contingent upon that payment shall be made, provided that the board is permitted to and holds the pupil activity in light of illness, the COVID-19, and Ohio High School Athletic Association and state and local precautions, orders, and guidance. Partial performance of duties shall be paid on a prorated basis following verification to the treasurer from the principal or athletic director of the portion of duties completed by the supplemental contract holder. And you can see the long list of fall athletic coaches as presented A through C, CC, and from the addendum, DD. Number 6, approve the following athletic department volunteers for the 2021 school year, pending timely receipt of all verifications and background checks as presented A through I.
Any questions for Mr. Hahn? Hearing none, may I get a motion, please? Motion made by Mr. Jimmy Johnson, second by Mr. Bratton. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman,
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson,
Yes.
Was it seconded by?
Mr. Bratton.
Number 7, approve the following extended service days for the 2021 school year as presented A through G.
Any questions? May I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Abbott, second by Mr. Jimmy Johnson. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman,
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson,
Abstain.
Number 8, approve the following 1-year academic supplemental contracts for the 2021 school year, contingent that payments shall be made provided that the board is permitted to hold the pupil activity in light of illness, COVID-19, and Ohio High School Athletic Association state and local precautions, orders, and guidance. Partial performance of duties shall be paid on a prorated basis following verification to the treasurer from the principal or athletic director of the portion of duties completed by the supplemental contract holder. And that would be A through KK. Number 9, approve Megan Mathias from Grand Canyon University for student teaching at the intermediate school with Toby Craner beginning September 3rd through December 16th, 2020.
Any questions? Hearing none, may I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Sherman, second by Mr. Abbott. Mr. Bigham?
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Okay, 9D, contracts and agreements. Approve an agreement of employment services with New Horizon Mental Health Services for the 2021 school year to provide early mental health intervention services per the specifications of the agreement. Number 2, approve the contract for security services with the Fairfield County Sheriff's Department for a school resource officer for the 2021 school year.
Any questions? I will make the motion.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Rod Johnson, seconded by Mrs. Sherman. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Okay, nothing under 9E. Under F, personnel resignations and retirements, accept the resignation of Abigail Love, intermediate school teacher, effective immediately. And number 2, accept the resignation of Janine Seeger, educational aide, effective May 28, 2020.
Questions? Concerns? May I get a motion, please? Second. Motion made by Mr. Jimmy Johnson, seconded by Mr. Bratton. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes. All right, thank you, Mr. Hahn. Number 10, new business. A, approve a resolution adopting a Calamity Day makeup plan. B, approve a memorandum of understanding with BCEA regarding fall 2020 and year-long supplemental contracts for the 2020-2021 school year. Any questions?
Just for the board information, the language in 10B mirrors the language from Mr. Hahn's recommendations in number 5 and 8. Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns? May I get a motion, please?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Bratton, seconded by Mr. Abbott. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes. 10C, approve the Bloom Carroll Reset and Restart Education Safety Plan for the 2020-2021 school year, developed with guidance from the CDC, the Ohio Department of Health, the Fairfield Department of Health, the AAP, and the ODE. Any questions in regards to this? I know we'll be getting into this here in a few minutes, but if you want to go ahead and talk a little bit to it now, Sean.
Yeah, and so this is something that has been a work in progress. And at the June 24th Board of Education planning session, the board was presented publicly with a draft plan of the possible restart to education really across Ohio, many states across our nation. A lot of guidance has been provided from the CDC and, as I stated, the Ohio Department of Health, and what the principles were that needed to be included in restarting the potential to restart schools. And this kind of combines two things: potential operating or status levels, we call them, for instructional delivery throughout this school year as a result of the pandemic. And it also includes a lot of the safety protocols that will be implemented. And you have to understand that this is a fluid document for now. We continue to get guidance as situations change, as we get more data and learn more from health officials about this virus and the overall pandemic. There's a lot of local control being given, guidance from the state. They're really starting to leave it to local health departments. The state has some systems in place, the Ohio Public Health Advisory System in the 4 levels that just got implemented recently, and that was as of July 9th on Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. The residents of Fairfield County felt the effects of that when Fairfield County, who had been sitting at a level 2 on the new advisory system, moved to a level 3 which means that the county is triggering 4 to 5 indicators that resulted in the increase. I'll get into this first and then share some of those other items, but to kind of hit on the main points of the Bloom Carroll Plan of Action to reset and restart education, there's basically 3 sections to this: the status of school and the delivery of instruction, how we can follow health official guidance and create healthy learning environments, and then how we would potentially respond, who we would work with in responding to a confirmed case of COVID-19. I can guarantee you that if we are in session, and that this isn't said to influence one way or another, we have to be prepared to respond to a confirmed case. We're dealing with it now with people that are being exposed, whether they're coaches, whether they are student athletes that were exposed to somebody that tested positive, and a positive test is a positive lab test that is reported to the county. And it's only, no matter what operating conditions we are under, we will have to continue to work with our employees that are here if they are potentially exposed, or any student athlete or student is potentially exposed as well. So there's some additional information in here. The goal of this plan, as a parent, as a superintendent, 3 children that attend school here and responsible for 2,000 students and 225 staff members, and potentially their families and any community member that comes into our school, is that we want to develop the safest plan possible, following the guidance of health professionals, and to protect the health and safety of those individuals. That's first and foremost. And I think the goal is always for all of us to understand the value of in-person instruction and the importance of trying to get to, whenever that might be, whether it's to start the year or at some point of the year, to get our schools fully open and safe is always our goal. I think a lot of people ended the last school year in May thinking that things would settle and we would be back to school without any thought, maybe some safety precautions, and that has not been the case with this pandemic at this point. So again, this plan's been developed with the guidance of all these health officials, even the American Academy of Pediatrics and their position. But our goal, our mission, is to support our students academically, socially, emotionally, and their physical needs, and that all staff members, all students that can possibly understand what we're dealing with, and all parents have to understand that any mode of operation could change in a matter of hours due to a case or how the health department guides us in dealing with an outbreak or a confirmed case in a school building. So we have to be unbelievably flexible and patient in this process, and I think it's important that people understand that nobody here in this group that I have seen is trying to tell health officials how to do their jobs or pretend that we know more than health officials unless they have a health background themselves. And I personally don't, so I have to rely on the experts and the data and their guidance. And we can all have our personal opinions about this, what we're about to get into, but when you're responsible for a lot of people, it's a heavy burden, and you want to make sure you're doing what's best for students as much as possible instructionally and protecting the health and safety of all of our staff and students. So that's what those basic principles say. There are potentially 4 status levels. We reviewed these last month. There's going to be a lot of colors that we're going to talk about. Status green means that all students attend school on a normal schedule with increased safety protocols and cleaning. Status level yellow would be a hybrid to basically be able to social distance more on school buses and in the classroom. It's tough to achieve 6 feet anywhere in a school, even 3 feet in a school. When you have 16 modular classrooms that are 678 square feet and 25 students in them and a teacher, it's very difficult. The hybrid schedule is an alternating day with a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday group, and then in every other Friday. Status level orange would be used if there was a specific building. We could have an outbreak or a case in Lithopolis at the intermediate school, let's say 3rd grade. and those students are potentially exposed to a case and the health department comes along and says, this is how we need you to handle this. Potentially one school building could be shut down in our district, the other ones could continue possibly under status level green or status level yellow, okay? So parents have to understand that every school district is looking at the same thing. They have to have a plan basically for all, I would say 3 of these, potentially 4. The 4th one is the status level red, and that would be a remote or online learning environment. We all know what that looks like with improvements, hopefully, as we got better and we've continued to kind of reflect on how we can continue to get better with a remote or online learning environment if we have to implement that this fall. And we all know what green looks like on a normal 5-day schedule. None of our students and staff understand what it's like to go to school during a pandemic. In March, we were going to school, things were normal on Friday. And we sent the kids home and they didn't come back. And they never had to go to school with masks, with hand sanitizing required, hand washing required, trying to social distance, all the procedures at lunch and playgrounds and in classrooms and choir and band and all these different places. They've never had to go to school like that. So that would be a new concept, to go to school in a pandemic. It's not like we've done that before, but every parent knows what green is, and every parent now knows what red is in our district. They don't know what yellow is, and they don't know what it's like to have some of their kids going to maybe the middle school or high school, but the primary school was shut down and their child's at home in that scenario. So those are the 4 status levels of instructional delivery that I foresee that we could potentially be in. And I'll be honest, the superintendents across Ohio have participated in virtual meetings, all 600 of us. A lot of us have the same concepts and ideas that fit for our districts. You won't hear anything much different than a normal schedule with safety precautions, some kind of alternating hybrid schedule to achieve more social distancing, and an all online format as well. So it's not that unique. To try to envision how it would work is difficult, but that's where we are at this time. I broke down, this would be available to our public as soon as a decision is made within a reasonable time to get this out. But it breaks down what green means, and typically right now we received some guidance today, this afternoon, from the Fairfield Department of Health. I provided the board with a copy. On the new Ohio Public Health Advisory System, the guidance from the Fairfield Department of Health is that a green status should be considered potentially if the county is in a level 1 or level 2 COVID risk advisory. I'll get into the facial coverings more in this presentation. The yellow status, to get into some specifics, it may be instituted, it's underlined may, that we're not definitely locked into the health department's guidance on this. They're local decisions. I have to make local decisions about snow days, those types of things. I can still close the schools even before this pandemic for our own outbreak of, let's say, influenza during flu season. So under this COVID pandemic, a yellow status could potentially be implemented or aligned better to a level 3 guidelines from the Ohio Public Health Advisory System. If we had 2 groups, we would break it up into groups A through K. If your last name began with the letter A through K, that would be group 1, and they would attend in-person instruction on Monday, Wednesday, or every other Friday. Students with their last names beginnings with the letter L through Z would be group 2, and they would attend in-person instruction on Tuesday, Thursday, and every other Friday. Students would be provided lessons or materials for non-attendance days in review or preparation for the next in-person attendance day. I have an alternating every other day schedule that I can share briefly with you and talk about some of the main features of it. If there are children that live in a household with different last names, then the student would attend in-person instruction. Then those students would attend in-person instruction on the same day, so the family could coordinate. If there's 2 children, 1 guardian, or even just multiple people living in a household, those children would attend on the same day. They would need to contact the district office. Just to give you an idea, A through K, we have 1,045 students that come to our buildings with the last name A to K every day. this coming school year. We have 1,028 students that have the last name L through Z. So initially, if we got some of those calls and we have people with multiple last names, those would probably bump into Group B to start off until we get it balanced. It doesn't achieve 100% 50-50 balancing in every classroom, but it does in the buildings, cafeterias, school buses, it helps. Just about everywhere you look, it's amazing in every district, but you can pretty much draw a line around letters K or L, and you got 50% of your population in either group.
Mr. Owens, so if I'm reading what you provided us from Fairfield County, they are suggesting, if the county, they're suggesting, right, they're not mandating, suggesting, if the county is in red, they're suggesting a blended red.
Yes, here's the document that I received this afternoon from the Director of Nursing for the Fairfield Department of Health. We superintendents have met with the Department of Health on multiple occasions, over the last month and a half in trying to develop some consistency throughout the county. The health department provided us with this today, and level one, I'm not going to read every detail, but schools may be in session in classrooms. This is guidance, okay? This is guidance based upon health professionals. Level two, for the Ohio Public Health Advisory System, schools may be in session. There's some extra things that they would want you to do with high-risk staff, monitor school buildings for outbreaks, those types of things. Level three, in the state of Ohio, or in your county, obviously all their guidelines, which I'll show you here, need to be considered, but they suggest consider a blended online or classroom learning environment. If this option is used, try to keep cohorts of student and staff together, try to group students, similar to what we would be doing. And if level four, meaning a severe exposure or spread throughout the county, they would recommend, strongly recommend going to an online, which would be similar to our red status.
So I guess, again, setting aside, if I think about this is basically the Fairfield County Department of Health. Again, I know we're going to go on to multiple levels of government, right? So you got the line saying each county's a certain color.
Right.
Then he's saying, Fairfield County Health Department, you guys figure it out yourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And they just issued this guidance today, suggesting to schools, right, to yourselves, mm-hmm. to us, here is how we would think about it. As health professionals, this is what we would do for a school. Am I thinking about that right? Or are they just saying, hey, we're just kind of throwing this out here and you guys do whatever you want, but as health professionals, this is what we would do.
They're saying as health professionals, this is their recommendation to the school districts in Fairfield County. Okay. Each county is kind of developing their own, each county Department of Health, right. But our health officials at the Fairfield Department of Health, as you can see, are suggesting and recommending that these are the, there's more levels of severity. If you look at the screen in front of you, obviously level one means an active exposure and spread and to follow all health orders, and they list some of those here, what precautions should be taken. And then under level two, it's an increased exposure and spread throughout your county, exercise a high degree of caution, follow all the health orders. So level two has some additional considerations that builds on level one. And then level three is a very high exposure and spread in your county, limit activities as much as possible, and follow all current health orders. Level three talks about a decrease with in-person interactions with others, consider necessary travel only, limit attending gatherings of any number, in addition to level one and level two. So this is the Ohio Public Health new advisory system. This is what it means to be under level three in Ohio right now. You move between levels based upon the number of indicators for your county, 0 to 1, 2 to 3 for level 2, 4 to 5. What has happened is these are the 7 levels, the 7 indicators. The new cases per capita, the sustained increase in new cases, congregate, the proportion of new cases that are not congregate cases, meaning widespread community transmission, sustained increase in emergency room visits, sustained increase in outpatient visits. The 6th indicator is the sustained increase in new COVID-19 hospital admissions, and the 7th one is the intensive care unit bed occupancy. So Fairfield County, if people were wondering how we got here, this is a Fairfield County report, and you can get these by going to the coronavirus website, clicking on the Public Health Advisory System, and then you can click on your county, and it pulls up the information about your county. So this particular document says that the reason Fairfield County went into level 3 was because we triggered 4 of the 5. And you can drop back every couple weeks. The data is a 2-week running tally. And Fairfield County saw an increase in new cases per capita. They saw an increase in non-congregate cases. And they saw an increase in emergency room visits and outpatient visits. You can see the new patient count per capita per 100,000. You can see the 7-day average of new cases here. You can see the COVID-related emergency department visits starting to go up as of July 1st, and then the outpatient visits that they saw an increase over a couple-week period. And you can also see the ICU, which were the 4 areas that we triggered. So I hope that when we say level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 in your county, that we all have a common understanding of why your county got to that level. Whether you agree or disagree with the data, that's what we have to follow.
And it's all COVID related, right?
It's all COVID related.
A rip on our level.
Well, the ICU report, I noticed, if you looked at the ICU report, I mean, they have it broken down by COVID patients. They have it broken down in blue by COVID patients and by non-COVID patients. And then the total ICU beds and the concern threshold is at 80%. So it's, I guess, everything else is COVID related. Okay.
Now, have they said like how long we will stay in that level 3, or if the cases start dropping, is there a timeline before they will put us back to level 2 or move us back up?
Yeah, my understanding is that it can fluctuate. I read it today on one of these documents. Sorry, I'm just skimming real quick. There is a strong possibility that the level Fairfield County falls into vary from week to week and can go up and down based upon the movement of the disease. Encourage flexibility. Understand that parents who are working may be more stressed finding childcare when students are learning from home and parents must still report to work. We understand that. It is certainly an issue, but it can vary. It can bounce back and forth. And that's why I don't want to be locked in 100% to these levels, but I think they're good indicators about when decisions are made, what data are you using, how are things happening in your local area.
So Mr. Hahn, when the levels do change, we go from level 3 to level 2. As far as the district, school board view, can you make those changes overnight? I mean, could you say? I can, and I would try not to do it overnight.
Right. Try to give a couple day notice typically, but that's how flexible we have to be. Now, if we have a confirmed case, I find out at 2 o'clock one afternoon that we have a confirmed case in the middle school, you can probably bet a message is going out that I'm gonna have to shut that building down, identify who needs to be quarantined by working with the local health department and our school nurses and our administration. And then, if they can let us get back to school, if they feel like, they have definitions of what direct exposure is, we may have to shut down our building for 2 to 5 days to disinfect. We may have to shut down our buildings for 14 days to isolate and quarantine individuals with the hope of, containing any spread or infection to other people. 14 days would be 10 school days. So that's a possibility that a building may, in a short notice, could potentially have to go to a red status. If the whole county or a huge outbreak in the district, we could potentially have to jump into red and do remote learning. Red status for Boone Carroll. Ours are green, yellow, orange, and red. Yeah. Some other things. I don't want to get too much on the data right now. I guess maybe I want to focus on this plan, but as I talk about shifting between levels, I want you to understand that. So back to the status level, instructional status level for yellow. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to look at this, and you'll hear districts talk about a lot of different things, maybe alternating weeks, maybe blocking a couple days on Monday, Tuesday, a group goes, and on Wednesday, Thursday, or Thursday, Friday. What happens with that. And there are some districts that, I personally have looked at this and felt like this is in the best interest of our students and staff to keep people engaged every so many hours, every other day. I worry that if you go every other week, potentially, you could be looking at a very long gap between instruction. Even if you did every 2 days, you could be looking at the students that went Monday, Tuesday might have 5 days off that you're trying to keep them engaged until their next day of school. If you look at districts that are doing every other week, there's parts of the calendar where they could have 10 days off. They went to school for 5, and then they're online. They have Saturday and Sunday off. Then they have 5 days online and Saturday and Sunday and maybe a holiday on a Monday. You're missing 10 days in a row, and that's not a Christmas or spring break. That's 10 days of no instruction if you go every other week. There are districts very close to us that are probably headed in that direction to do every other week. I don't model our school district after Franklin County at all, or suburban schools. We're unique. But I can tell you, I have talked to many superintendents of Outer Belt schools, and there are several that are doing a every other day calendar. And what that amounts to is that if you look at this calendar, and this would be available to parents to help plan, I say Monday, Wednesday, every other Friday. I say Tuesday, Thursday, every other Friday, but it doesn't always fall every other Friday. So I got a disclaimer on this. To provide equitable days of in-person instruction, Group 1 will have more scheduled Fridays due to the number of scheduled Mondays off school. There are 6 holidays or professional development days on our school calendar. And if you look here, for example, I wish I could blow this up a little bit more. I think I have it here somewhere. Let me blow this up for everybody. Yeah, file got a lot bigger than I wanted it to. You know what? Nothing works the way you want it to. Okay, here we go. All right, so if you look at this calendar and you see the start of school, Group 2 is your Tuesday, Thursday group. The first day of school is on a Thursday, so Group 2 would start. On Friday, the 21st, that would be the first group. That would be your Group 1, your A through K group. If you get to Labor Day, you obviously would only, the Group 1 group would only have 1 day of school. So there's back-to-back Fridays. Basically anywhere where there's a Monday off and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 right there. Anywhere where you have a Monday off, that Group 1 needs to be able to go on Friday. If you don't do that, by doing this, you balance, and it's equitable in terms of the 2 student groups both get 88 days of instruction this school year. Now, I hope to goodness that we don't have to do this for a whole year, or that, if we choose to do this, it's for a short time period and things continue to get better. But hypothetically, if we had to do this all school year, both groups would get 88 instructional days. If you, and each grading period would be balanced in terms of the kids would both get 21 instructional days in person, and then 23 for the second quarter, 21 for the third quarter, and 23 for the fourth quarter. If you didn't do that, if you didn't make that adjustment, you would potentially be looking at, and you just went straight every other Friday with these Mondays off, you would be looking at an imbalance of 6 days. That's more than a full week of one group getting more instruction than the other in person. So that's why when I say every other Friday, we will have to communicate if this is implemented at any point, which I think all 3 of these will probably end up being implemented at any point this school year. We will have to communicate from the district the night before, the week before, and remind people that, hey, this group is going on Friday. We'll send our text messages, we'll send our emails, so we don't have that confusion. But that's a little bit about the about the alternating day schedule, how that would work. It really keeps our students engaged so that when you have a student in Monday in class, and at the end of that class, maybe 12 students, 10, 12, 13 students in a classroom with the teacher, you can spread them out more. Our buses have half the population. And then you can say to that child that, hey, this is what you're working on tomorrow. You're going to learn this new topic. You're going to start to ask some questions about it. You're going to have this activity to complete. And remote learning doesn't always have to be on the computer. It could be something that you assign out in nature to do and think about, and then bring back to school on Wednesday to be engaged. But our students are always engaged every 48 hours, typically, or worst case scenario, from Thursday to Monday. They only have 4 days off typically, where they don't have a 5-day or a 10-day gap with some of the alternating schedules that you're probably going to start hearing about from other school districts. So I hope you can understand the reasoning for this. I know that there are people that will say, well, we should just go online one day. Well, I want to remind people that I surveyed our community and our parents. I surveyed our parents at the very end of May, beginning of June, because I didn't know what the future really held, and I wanted to be planned and prepared. And if you look at that, and since we have a lot of people here, I have no problem sharing it again. I've shared it with the board multiple times. But the responses to that planning survey at the time showed that a lot of people supported in early June going back to school 5 days a week with safety precautions, about 82% at that time. 18% did not feel comfortable at that time. But when they had the option between the first choice, second choice, third choice, and fourth choice, the choices were a normal schedule with safety precautions. Another option that they could rank was an alternating schedule every other day, every other Friday, in-person instruction. Another choice that they had was an alternating schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Friday being online. And our families felt like the first choice at that time was a preferred normal schedule with safety precautions. The second choice was the every other Friday in person, every other Friday in person rather than every other Friday being online, the third choice. And the last choice was all online at that time. So you will hear people say, well, why don't they just close their buildings one day and disinfect them and clean them? Well, we're going to be doing that every day, throughout the day and in the evenings. But right now, it's always tough for me to balance being a parent of 3 children and being the superintendent. And I can tell you, I need my kids to be safe, but I need to maximize the instruction of my own children and the instruction of other people's children. I worry about giving away a spring quarter. I worry about and we can say we taught online, and we did, and our teachers did an amazing job, and they were thrown into a very difficult situation. But there is nothing that compares to in-person instruction as much as you can, as safely as you can, in my opinion. So if we went online every other Friday, we would give away 33 more days of instruction, or about 17 more days of school for each group, for Group A and Group B. And we don't know how far into the future this pandemic is going to go, and we don't know how long schools can continue to operate under these conditions, and how much impact it's going to have academically, developmentally, emotionally, cognitively on the growth of this generation. I really worry about that when I look at my own children and everybody else's child in the school district. So I felt like in-person instruction, that if I have to make a decision, then I would rather have our kids in school as much as possible rather than sitting at home online so we can clean our buildings. We've got custodians that are going to work their tails off to do the best, and we've bought a lot of equipment to clean our buildings every evening. So that's why I felt an every other day Friday in person was more important, with parent feedback to support that.
Mr. Hunt, can I ask you another question on yellow? How do we think about kids that are on IEPs or special ed type children? Are they?
That's a great question.
So again, I don't know, I'm not in the classroom,
Yeah.
but my understanding is typically they are smaller groups
Yeah.
of kids. would that be something that would be looked at in terms of, hey, there's only 10 or 15 in a classroom?
Yeah.
That's okay, we're going to have them all come all the time?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it, but I think it can be misleading. We try as hard as we can with our special needs students to keep them in an inclusive setting in the regular ed classroom with their peers and pull them out for individual or small group work when we have to. You typically don't see special needs students in an inclusive room, maybe called a resource room. If you do, it's typically for only reading and math, and then they're integrated or included back in the regular ed classroom with supports for science and social studies. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend to the Board of Education or any parent that has a child with special needs, and I can tell you, I'm not saying too much, but that's near and dear to my heart, and we've got board members with the same situation with their children. So I cannot tell you that the quality of instruction will be the same for any remote learning for a child with special needs, whether if we're on an alternating day schedule or an all online setting. You cannot replicate the in-person instruction. But what can be done is that if we are in a situation like this, we can maximize the time with the students that we have. And if they need extra support in speech or physical therapy or whatever it might be, occupational therapy, or with a reading disability or a math disability, our intervention specialists and our aides will really target those students for when they are here, that we are maybe pulling them aside a little bit more, but it's still important socially that they're around their peers. We may have to consider compensatory services when things return to normal someday, if there's lost time. I think our intervention specialists are prepared to engage students virtually better in the future on those remote learning days. But when we have them here, I want you to know that it's not common for our special education students to be locked into a room with 7 or 8 kids all day. It may be a period that they're in a resource room for reading or math support, but again, it's not that extensive. We try to get our students the supports they need in the regular ed classroom as much as possible. Does that? I mean, the compensatory services, again, would be making up additional services or time when we can, when things return to normal. And that's what the Ohio Department of Education recommends. But again, we would stay engaged with them, frequent checks on those remote days by our intervention specialists and by aides. And then obviously on the days that we have in-person instruction and one child's at home, the teacher still has 12, 13, 14 students to teach in front of them and supervise, so they're not always available to be there interacting nonstop with the remote students. That's more independent kind of work. And then when we get them back, the intervention specialist can be helping, can be contacting those students, responding to them, interacting with them, checking in maybe during the day. But they also have other responsibilities for students that are here to go support too. So it's a legitimate concern, yeah. And I don't want to mislead that everything will be perfect. All right, orange. Again, orange is if we have a specific building shut down, maybe the high school is shut down, the other schools are still going. All right, and they may still be going under a yellow status or under a green status. All right. Red is all online. Probably if there's a level 4 in the county, we're going to really be pushed by the health department to consider how to help them stop the spread. Schools will be in Fairfield County, schools will be the largest congregate setting every single day. So the risk levels we talked about. So what about students that under yellow or green do not feel comfortable or are medically vulnerable, have underlying health conditions? What do we have available? And we have, as a district, a lot of online resources, a lot more than what most districts have that are purchasing online additional materials. We have a math curriculum that's available online for in-person instruction, but we've had an online Pearson curriculum. With our Journeys ELA curriculum, we have online, and StudySync, we have online access. We have other programs of intervention that help support those areas as well. But we have decided to provide a comprehensive K-12 online curriculum option that is based on the Ohio standards developed in Ohio. It's been around for probably 16 years or so, and it's continued to make improvements. A lot of the improvements include the quality of the content, the interactivity of the content, the fact that it integrates with Progress Book that students have accounts for, and they can access straight through Progress Book in one location. There's over 375 courses. There's core courses at each grade level, starting with kindergarten, reading, math, science, social studies. They have some electives. The way this would work is that students would still be Bloom Carroll students. They could still participate in activities, which maybe personally I might sit here and scratch my head about. If they can't come to school, but a parent feels comfortable sending them to practices or things, I might question that, but they could still technically do it. They're a Bloom Carroll student. They would, with the Virtual Learning Academy, there would be the opportunity to still interact with their teachers. So they would be on a roster. They would have a schedule. When you would still be in a second grade classroom, for example, and you would be on that roster of 25, but maybe 4 or 5 kids in that class have decided, their families have decided to do this online option. The teacher could create a subgroup roster within her class roster, and she could pick the reading and math and science and social studies lessons, the types of questions that are asked, how many questions are asked within each lesson. And all the lessons, again, are aligned to Ohio's academic content standards for each grade level. So it may be a different lesson or activity than what the in-person students are getting, but it's still addressing the same content standard. And then those assignments would be pushed out to them. Progress Book, one issue we'd have is with our budget cuts, with the cuts that we've had, the $470,000 at the end of this fiscal year, the potential that we're losing, $600,000 to $1 million on fiscal year 21. A lot of online comprehensive curriculums are very expensive. This one was very affordable for our school district. I'll just tell you, it's about $6,000. It's $3 a student. So we have it available for every student. And the teachers can use this curriculum for students here that they're teaching in person as a resource. They could assign it to our students. But it would be expected for the students that use our Virtual Learning Academy. It is called VLA, Virtual Learning Academy. So our teachers could assign the lessons, the students work on them. Now, people have to keep in mind that our teachers have 20 students they're teaching and supervising. There might be 5 children that are at home getting VLA lessons, but they're still Bloom Carroll students and they still work through them. And in terms of a management standpoint, we don't have the ability to hire 10 teachers. 10 teachers, a teacher costs us with benefits about $63,000 at step 0 because you have a salary plus potentially family insurance that the board pays or single insurance that costs us $10,000 a year. So the cost to hire a new teacher can be very expensive. If we hired 10 new teachers in our district to help manage this, you're potentially looking at $630,000 of costs, which we just are unable to do. So in consideration, how do you get your teachers to buy in and be able to manage this? It integrates with Progress Book. All the lessons, all of our teachers with the Progress Book account have access to every grade level of lessons, K to 12. And they can find lessons from other grade levels and push out. And they can pick the questions, whether they're multiple choice, extended response, short answer, whatever it might be. And except for the short answer and extended response, the Virtual Learning Academy grades this and enters the grade directly into Progress Book. So it takes the management side, the concern, out of it. One thing we talked about at our planning session in June was, okay, some people say, well, you have 7 teachers per grade level at the K to 4 level. Why don't you just take one of those teachers and have them manage the online students, and the other 6 teachers will manage your in-person kids? Well, that's great until things improve and parents, maybe they don't like that, how the Virtual Learning Academy is going, and they want to get their children back into face-to-face instruction. And now they start bringing their children back, but my other 6 classrooms are full, they're maxed out. And now I have to find a place for those students that are coming back, and I have to put them in with that 7th teacher who was doing my online. Now she's supposed to teach in person and instruct a group of students every day online. So each district is unique, and each district has so many resources. And I didn't feel like, and I did talk to the teacher representative in early June about this, and he didn't take a position one way or another. He just thought about it, but we continued to look for ways, and I talked about it with our administrative team, and we felt like initially like we had plenty of resources to provide online lessons for our students. But what we didn't have is one location to access all your core classes and even some electives, and then make it convenient for our teachers to manage that aspect and still teach students face-to-face. And I think we found a really good option here with Virtual Learning Academy. I've used it in another district, but it's been improved dramatically over the years, and it's very cost-effective for our school district. So
Mr. Hahn, if I'm a teacher and I have 20 children that I teach during the day, I then have a group of 5 students, right? That are
possibly, let's just say, yeah.
I'm making up on Virtual Learning Academy.
Right.
Do I, as a teacher, then just have to monitor those 5 and ensure they're doing their work? And it may be, student A hasn't turned in anything for 5 days.
Right.
I'm sending a follow-up.
Yeah.
Or if all 5 students are on top of it, they're doing their work, everything's being entered in the progress book, looks good, I'm done. Is that how I think?
Right. We can see the students log in through Progress Book. They would, just like they go into Progress Book now, they can see their grades. There's a part where it says activities, and then they would see all their lessons for each subject area, and they could complete that. And you can see the progress of the student. You can see the responses. You can see the grade that's automatically entered right into your grades that are assigned just to that subgroup of students. Or you could assign, maybe one night if you're teaching high school honors biology, you might have 4 or 5 kids at home that are doing this lesson, but you think it's a valuable lesson. You could also tell your class after a 20-minute lecture or activity, hey, I want you to get your Chromebooks out, and I want you to complete this lesson, the same one the kids are doing at home. So, yes, the teachers, at some point of their day during their planning, lunch, at some point we would want them to monitor, but also our administrators can log into Progress Book and see login activity. There are expectations that if a family chooses to do this, there are expectations that will be communicated. It's a draft form right now, but we do expect children to log in daily for every day that they're scheduled to be in school. We check their login activity to make sure they're in attendance. We ask that they don't flip-flop back and forth every couple days or every week, depending on the wind. We ask for a 9-week commitment to that, just for consistency.
But if they get 6 weeks into it,
that's my
they can
question.
say, I'm sending my kid back to school.
Right.
They can, just for the sake of the child and the teacher, and for some consistency. It would be nice to see a 9-week commitment.
But they would go back into that same class.
Yeah, and again, so if you have Mrs. Spicer in 2nd grade, you're still with Mrs. Spicer. Right. And the minute you come back in, you're back in that classroom for in-person. You're on the roster. Okay. We just created a subgroup for you for your VLA group. Okay? If you're a middle school student here you're taking 6th grade classes, you're in 6th grade science at Bloom Carroll. You have a Bloom Carroll schedule, but your lessons from a management standpoint will be VLA science lessons, VLA math lessons, VLA social studies. There are some other electives that can be pushed out. We offer more electives here than what are available through VLA, so we'll have to work through that. But you have a Bloom Carroll middle school schedule in the event that you come back, or the event that you're with us to start the year and then you leave. So,
Mr. Hahn, and to that point, going through here, this is obviously a huge packet, but when you look at the curriculum based on this, it is pretty impressive. My question would be, so somebody decides to come back, the second 9 weeks, let's say, is in your experience doing this with another school district, was it on par, the lesson that was taught on par with what's on board? So
in terms of the academic content standards, yes. Yeah. In terms of the standards, yes, they are.
When you would go select a subject, so if we're learning, algorithms or something in algebra, hopefully it's covered at the same time.
Yes.
The Virtual Learning Academy. So if they did come back, they're not going to be struggling in the classroom as well.
Right.
That's one thing I would want to.
There are, like I said, 375 courses. In kindergarten, you have ELA, math, science, social studies, Spanish enrichment, and ELA common assessments. A lot of those are the same for each grade level. Jump to grade 3, you have ELA, math, science, social studies, Spanish, test preparation, enrichment for kids, math 3, common assessment. All this stuff will be available through this presentation to our families. You get into 5th grade, you start to see digital citizenship, some other electives, but at the high school level, they have environmental science, forensic science, integrated environmental science, physical science, marine biology, medical terminology, AP physics, AP world history, US history, sociology, psychology, geography, financial literacy, economics, AIR prep, which would be your end of course exam test prep. There's technology courses. There are some ag or family and consumer science courses, which I thought were really unique. Child development, family living, financial lit, integrated family living. There's fine arts, art history, history of jazz, history of rock and roll, introduction to theater, music appreciation, Renaissance art, career training, oil and gas classes, career planning, business administration, agriculture, public safety, student leadership. So there's a wide range of curriculum, and this covers all students, 2,000 students in our district. The next most affordable option was a grade 3 through 12 curriculum, which doesn't address our K-2 need. It was $100 per student, and let's say based on the feedback we had, let's say 300 students that chose to go online out of 2,000. For the first 100 students, it was $175 a student. That would be $17,500. For the next, for every student over 100, it was $50. So if we had to get to 300 students, I'd still have 200 students at $50 a pop. That's $10,000. It costs us $27,500 for grades 3 to 12 curriculum, but it only provides 300 students a seat. This is the entire district, and our teachers can use it. Our teachers can use it whether they're using in-person instruction or for the online virtual learning academy group.
If it's an option, if we go to, say, status yellow, where we go every other day, is the VLA something we could use for the students on their days off instead of?
We could. A teacher could choose to, but a teacher doesn't have to. A teacher doesn't have to, because I want to stress that I think kids are on computers a lot, and remote learning can be deeper, maybe sometimes without the computer. If we assign an activity or a lesson or provide a resource that students can do, the next day in preparation, something to read, something to go out and answer questions and walk around in your yard or with your parents in a park or something. So there's things that will prep them for that next day, but our teachers have access to all 375 courses. A first grade teacher has access to 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade lessons in each area. And they're already imported into Progress Book, and they just push them out to their students, and they can just assign it to their subgroup or to the entire class. But it's expected that if we're doing this virtual learning academy, that we're using VLA curriculum for the group that's always at home. But it could be used if we were shut down for 2 weeks, the teachers could start applying it to all students. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I know most people probably know this was not in the original draft, correct? Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you going out and finding this information, because I think this provides a great opportunity for maybe families within our district, right, that say, I'm not comfortable sending my child, which is okay. Right. We have something for you now versus, sorry, you either got to come to school or you don't. Right. Or go find something else, right? So at least now we were saying we have an option. And if things progress and get better, you integrate right back in.
You're still a Bloom Carroll student, so this is a little bit different to offer our own virtual learning under these conditions this year. But typically when students join Odella or Trecca, they withdraw. They're not Bloom Carroll students. The parent's responsible for them, and that's attending an online charter community school. There are parents that homeschool, and sometimes parents get confused. They'll say, I'm homeschooling my child. They go to Odella. No, that's not homeschooling. That's attending an online charter or community school. Homeschooling is when you fill out an application, you send it down to the county. Each superintendent of that school district signs off that you've had a curriculum reviewed and approved, and that you are taking sole responsibility for your child's learning. When students go to Odella or Trecca or something like that, the local tax money, that the state share of, let's say a student would get $2,400 from the state for each student that lives in our district from the state. That money plus all the other local property tax that we get for that student or income tax also goes with that child. So when a student withdraws to go to Trecca, they take about $6,000 away from the district. But if it keeps those students, because someday this will be over. Someday this will be over. And if we can keep those students and those families with us and integrate them back in when they feel comfortable, and this can't go on forever. I don't think we can do it forever, that kind of flexibility. At some point in the future, parents will have to decide if they want to homeschool their kids, if they want to use an online or charter community school, or if they want to attend Bloom Carroll schools in person. But for this pandemic, I felt like, and our curriculum director and our principals, we met multiple times. Well, we met here in the media center in early June, and we felt like we had a lot of resources to push out to our students and that our teachers could handle it. But in this situation, as the pandemic has not let up, and we can kind of see that there's going to be spikes moving in through the new school year, that we felt like for $6,000, if we keep one student enrolled with us, this covers the cost, and we keep them here at Bloom Carroll. So that's obviously what you
Sean, I
approved.
have a couple comments. First of all, I appreciate the fact that you also, based on our planning session, this was not part of the plan, and that was a big concern of mine, that we did not have an option for families who did not feel comfortable coming back or who had who are high risk, whether the parents are high risk or the kids. So I'm thrilled to see that we are offering an option, because I feel like BC kids should be able to stay BC kids. Things I like about your plan are that the kids have a seat. I think that's really because we don't know if it's gonna work for kids or, so I think the fact that they're on the roster, I love that. I love that the teacher will be engaged with the kids, that the teacher will have an online presence, and I love that you're giving them a curriculum so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They're already in the classroom teaching, so this allows them to have curriculum at their disposal. Again, they can add to it, choose something else, but this helps alleviate their, like you said, the management of it. They also still have their Google Classroom, which they're getting PD on in August, right? So they'll have that as well. If they prefer to have their own assignments, it's there too, which a lot of them will use that for kids in person as well, just to have that online presence in case we go back and forth.
Yeah.
You know, like on the yellow days, they'll probably use Google Classroom and or BLA or combo of both. I think it's great too that kids will have an idea of what this looks like. They'll be trained. Most kids will be able to use VLA and view.
Yeah, so they can still access it through ClassLink. We have a single sign-on because there's so many online programs. Our kids log into one application called ClassLink, and that gets them into everything. So then they go into Progress Book.
To them, and everybody will be able to use it. It won't be overnight. Oh, here's a new thing.
The huge feature with this is that it integrates with Progress Book.
Right.
Our teachers know Progress Book.
Right.
They can access the lessons, push them out there, and our students know Progress Book. So that's where an online VLA student would go. A Bloom Carroll VLA student would go to Progress Book and access their lessons. You know, some of the things that I want parents to understand is, again, I'm going to stress, there will be parents that are disappointed if they choose this option. So and the reason I just want to be realistic with them is because our teachers still have to teach students in front of them every day. And they are taking, the parent and the child are taking a lot of responsibility to access their lessons that the teachers are providing and for completing the work. And there is a teacher teaching in the classroom in person. And our teachers do a phenomenal job, but they can only do so much. So,
well, it'll be similar to the days that the kids are home if we go yellow.
Yeah.
Parents are gonna have to, I mean, everybody's gonna have to step up and make sure their kids get their work done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but I think it also offers an opportunity, just real quick, to recoup that money as well. We've got 31 kids online, and now we have an online, you know, for at least this year, come back and be VC Kid.
Yeah.
I wanna go back to the question that Mr. Bratton asked earlier about, you know, I think it's great that it connects to Progress Book and that kind of thing, but maybe beyond the monitoring of it, is there any engagement expectation for those teachers? Like I've got a third grader or a first grader, and my kid's home, say I got a first grader, fifth grader, and a sixth grader, and they're all home. And they're on VLA, and we're doing great, you know, the parents engaged, and there may be emails going back and forth between the teacher, but is there any type of a engagement piece to that? I know the teachers are here during the day, but is there any type of,
yeah, and that's
will
what
they ever talk to their teacher or anything like that?
Yeah, and that's what's tough. I mean, our teachers are paid for 7.5 hours a day. We have a collective bargaining agreement. They have families, their own children, own activities to try to get to. So that's the difficult part. We don't have the ability, like I said, to assign a teacher per grade level or to hire additional staff to oversee and manage this. So tried to find a system that is as efficient as possible for our teachers to manage. Our teachers will have to, they get here, typically 30 minutes before the work day. They're here another 30 minutes after the student day. And those are times, and then by contract, we have to give them 30 minutes, but sometimes they're given more in their contractual day for lunch, so they may have to use some of that extra time there. Those are some of the ways that they're going to have to manage. But there are expectations for our teachers that I will communicate and explain how this system works. And then there are expectations that I want our parents and students that choose this option to understand.
Absolutely.
And I put those up in front of you. And when a parent notifies us, it may take up to 5 days to get things set, to get the lessons pushed out before the lessons are available. It's not going to be one-day turnaround. Our teachers need a couple days to create those groups and get lessons picked out and so on for those students.
Is there a deadline for parents to choose the option?
No. However, in the presentation, after August 1st, there's a Google form that's available that they can fill out, and they can also see the expectations I have some communication resources planned and ready to go with different options depending on what the board picks. And we'll send that out, but there are expectations ready to go. There's a Google form that they can fill out to notify us, but it also asks parents after August 1st to contact their building principal or the curriculum director to make sure they fill out this form. So we kind of have a running record, and we can let each building know which kids in your building are potentially looking to be online. You can go online at any point of the school year. So I don't want to lock people in that, if they don't feel comfortable after 2 weeks into school that they can't change. But we would like it to be for a 9-week period and not,
Absolutely.
you don't make a decision on Friday and by the middle of next Wednesday, you've switched again.
Right.
So.
And then I have another question. Like looking ahead, and this might just be a personal thing, but I feel like this is great because I feel like we're gonna experience a high level of absenteeism. Just all over the board, whether mom feels a cough and she pulls them out for the rest of the week, or, not looking in the future, but I have a feeling we're gonna have high absenteeism between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I like this because I feel like it'll be consistent. If a kid had been out for a week, they can always go here, the teacher can give them their presence.
And our teachers, they don't have to. The teachers don't have to. We have a lot of online access and in-person materials as
Right.
well. Like I said, our reading and math curriculum is online. It can be, it's online, and the students access it now. And those teachers can continue to use those resources, Success Maker. We were using Compass last year. We've made a switch this year with our ELA to Lexia and to Success Maker for Pearson Math and Journeys and StudySync ELA. So we have RAS kids at the younger grades.
Right.
There's a lot of resources that we have. They can still create
So
their own.
it's not just this, right, but I think this is great because it does help the teachers not have to do that.
So they can create their own lessons and push them out, or they can also look through and say, hey, I like this lesson. It's
Right.
beneficial to what I'm doing, and I can assign it. So,
Awesome.
okay.
Thanks.
All right. Healthy learning environments. What will be done? We're going to ask parents to self-assess for symptoms, take temperatures at home. Obviously, this will be huge. If a child comes to school with a fever, they're going to be isolated. They're going to be sent home. I know some people may not be happy. We do get kids that show up on a bus, show up in a school building. The parents are in a tough situation. They have to go to work, but they send a child to school sick. We cannot take the risk and tolerate that. Obviously, we're not going to publicly embarrass anybody, but if you send a child to school with symptoms, our nurses are going to address it, and the child will be isolated and sent home immediately, and they will communicate what the expectation is to return. We will be taking time to wash and sanitize different areas and teach effective hygiene practices. The little ones, think about all the things they have to learn. We ask parents to start teaching these things now at home, start working with masks with them. And I'll get to what the requirements are. I know people are really wanting to know what we're going to do with masks. But we're going to be thoroughly cleaning. We're going to try to social distance and break groups up. And I think we can use outdoor spaces as much as possible in the fall and nice days. If I saw 3 classes out in the Arboretum sitting down reading books or with whiteboards and doing math problems, I'd have no problem with that if it's safe. And I think it can be safe in Carroll, Ohio. on our campus. There's just different ways that we're going to have to do things, and we're going to try to social distance in cafeterias, break groups up a little bit, maybe send half the grade level out to play while the other group eats, not let them stand in line together. There's a lot of things that I can continue to go through, and then we're also going to implement face covering policies for students and staff. Obviously, it's required right now by the state of Ohio for staff members to wear masks, and there are exceptions to those. I won't go into all of them, but that list continues to expand. And then we will also, strongly recommend masks for our students, and it's probably more appropriate in grades 3 through 12 than it is K to 2, but they can be effective in the K to 2 population as well. There can be a lot of issues with them, but if parents can work with them and we can get children to wear them, it may help keep us in school more than it sends us out if we don't use them. So I think it's important, whether it's become very political, very divisive. If people can understand that a mask may keep us in school, it might be beneficial even if you personally disagree with it. So cleaning and disinfecting, like I said, school buses, before and after routes, hand sanitizer dispensers being installed in every classroom. We have foggers that will be used to disinfect classrooms very quickly with the disinfectant. And again, we will be cleaning every night as well. Our maintenance and custodial staff will have to focus on trash and quickly sweeping floors, but things may not be as organized, but the room may be disinfected and the trash may be out, and that may be all they're able to get done in that evening. So again, what steps or how can we prepare for a healthy learning environment? Face shields, where face shields are appropriate. Students with speech, we're also buying clear face masks so the student with speech services can see the speech pathologist moving their lips. Those are very expensive, but we've had to buy those. We've had to buy face shields. There's different ways that you just have to work around this. We've got non-touch infrared scanning thermometers. We're not planning right now to scan every student that comes in, but we have to be able to take temperatures when we see signs or symptoms or children are not feeling well. Heavy-duty gloves for bus drivers and custodians, social distancing barriers for secretaries and different personnel, safety signage. We talked about symptoms. I'll share with parents what the symptoms are according to the CDC. If there's a fever over 100, certainly keep your child at home. Teaching the young children and all children the proper hygiene. There's a lot that we have to do at the beginning of the year if we get to have a beginning of the year. We'll work with health department officials. We'll use visual markings. We'll keep groups of students together. Typically in like 4th grade in our intermediate school, the kids go back and forth between 2 teachers. If we can move the teachers rather than have two students sitting at a desk throughout the day and just one sitting at the desk, and move the teacher, we can do that. Our teachers are mobile, they have laptops, they have docking stations, they can move from room to room. That's not always feasible at the middle school and high school level. It might work better at some of the elementaries, specifically the intermediate school. One-way hallways, keeping desks spread apart as much as possible in traditional rows facing the same direction rather than face-to-face. That's going to be a challenge in some of the kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade because they often work at tables with 4 students. We're going to try to have them facing the same direction or on the ends rather than directly across from each other. We will establish secondary clinics for regular patients and what we believe might be COVID patients. Limiting visitors and volunteers from campuses. Meetings for PTO, athletic boosters to meet remotely or outside. Obviously, if we can control what we can control, if we can control our students and staff and try to limit the potential for an adult, a visitor to come in that may have not known that they were exposed, that now shut down our building when that wasn't necessary, we got to focus on our students and staff as much as we can in keeping them protected and in school. We will monitor absenteeism because it might be an indication that there's a virus spreading. Limit the number of students in restrooms with signage. Trying to coordinate that with the elementary school will be a challenge. We will monitor inventory of PPE, sanitizer, soap, cleaning and disinfecting supplies. Encourage students to pack lunches or provide packaged food items. Facial coverings will be required when working in food preparation areas. Limit the number of students in a food serving line. We've purchased and implemented a barcode scanner for point of sale terminals. Students typically punch in their lunch code on a keypad. So you have 2,000 kids, maybe, or let's say 1,000 are buying today. They're touching the same keypad. They won't have to do that. They'll have a barcode, a card that will be laminated, and they can have their number scanned, like almost like a credit card, rather than punching their keypad or their ID number in. Congregate areas like before school and after school, we will obviously limit those. When students get off a bus, one group at a time, rather than 4 or 5 or 6 buses unloading at a time and a mass of students entering the building, and then congregating in the hallway before they can go to their classrooms. We will dismiss them 1 bus at a time, get them into classrooms as quickly as possible rather than large congregating areas. We're not changing start and end times of the school day, but we got to be flexible with when kids got into the classroom and when they didn't under this scenario. So try to increase natural air circulation in our buildings. I know it can be a safety issue. It can be a concern for children with asthma and allergies, but if we get a nice day and we can get the doors and windows propped open and keep air circulating, we want to do those things. We need to close traditional drinking fountains, and we've installed cup dispensers next to the drinking fountain. Yes, they still have to push a button to fill up a cup, but they don't have to put, a little elementary student typically puts their mouth right on the spigot of the drinking fountain. So we probably want to avoid that. Playgrounds, we may need to close down some equipment. We may need to limit use where kids grab a hold of things and swing on things. We may need to wipe those down by lunch monitors and custodians at different points of the day. Reduce sharing equipment and manipulatives for PE, music, art, unless they've been disinfected. No field trips until further notice. Again, if we send a group of students to the zoo and they contracted a case of COVID there, probably not a good decision because now those students are now online. We need to focus on instruction here at Bloom Carroll as much as we can. Face coverings. Obviously, the CDC and the Ohio Department of Health in the counties are requiring them under certain levels. Wearing a mask can reduce the spread and decrease the chances of needing to close schools. They can be beneficial on buses and in transportation at events and meetings. Anytime you have to instruct a student closely, educating medically vulnerable students that come to school, or even the staff members that may be medically vulnerable. So we strongly encourage masks. Visitors in the buildings will need to wear a mask. Who should not wear a mask would be children under 2 or anyone who has trouble breathing or is unconscious or incapacitated or otherwise unable to remove a mask without assistance. Special needs students that ride special transportation routes. Obviously, we have aides on those routes, but I don't know under some of their physical conditions if they could physically remove one if they needed to in a hurry. So we got to watch things like that. For students, again, I know we got a lot of parents that will need to plan and prepare, but the district is strongly recommending that students wear a mask unless they are unable to do so for health or developmental reasons. Students will be responsible for providing their own facial covering at school and on buses. Facial coverings will not, may be more developmentally in 3rd through 12th grade. Students in K-2 may present more challenges using a face mask. However, they're still encouraged and can be effective. Face shields will be permitted as an alternative for students where cloth face coverings would hinder. So if you bought your child a shield and you want them to wear it, that's fine, but please practice with them as much as possible before they come to school. For employees, employees must wear a face mask at all times unless it is unsafe to do so, or doing so would significantly interfere with the learning process. The district will provide each staff member with a washable face covering. Special situations where they need to wear a mask: if you're working within 6 feet of a student or fellow employee, if you're in close proximity of someone considered in the high-risk category, and if you're in a high-traffic area like a hallway. Exceptions, I think a lot of people are aware of the exceptions at this point. Transportation. I talked to the board about this. We know that transportation is an issue. We cannot find enough drivers and buy and lease enough buses to triple our bus fleet. We'd have to go up to close to 60 buses and 60 drivers to do that. We have about 20 right now. So we have on our rosters 60 to 70 students per bus. We have about 24 to 26 seats per bus. In our survey earlier on, a lot of parents sign up for the bus, but they don't actually ever put their child on a bus. about 70% said their children would still ride a bus, about 30% said they would not. So we know who those students are now, and we can take them, hypothetically, take them off the roster to reduce, from a number standpoint, how many students are riding a bus. But we will disinfect. Again, parents should be health assessments at home. Students from the same family will be assigned to sit together. Buses will be cleaned and disinfected before and after every route, such as middle school, high school, and then they go out for elementary. It needs to be wiped down and disinfected. We have materials for all of that, or supplies. Facial coverings should really be worn on school buses. You're in close proximity, they should really be worn. Hand sanitizer will be available on buses and at entrance and exit points of school buildings prior to loading and unloading. Drivers will be required to follow employee guidelines for facial coverings. Drivers will dismiss students one at a time, and on nice days, we'll try to have windows open and air moving on the school buses as much as possible. So if we have a case, I'm not going to go through every detail here. This is kind of a lengthy part from the CDC and the Fairfield Department of Health. But if we have a case, we'll immediately work with the health department. We'll obviously need to follow up with families, typically those in the entire building. I can't imagine just trying to only communicate with those that were considered directly exposed. Being exposed, according to the health department, is knowing that you were exposed to somebody that has tested, that has a positive lab test for COVID-19. Not a presumed, but a positive official lab test. The Fairfield Department of Health considers direct exposure as being within 6 feet without a mask for a cumulative of more than 15 minutes. So if you're only exposed to somebody for 5 minutes and you are within 6 feet and you do have a mask, they don't really consider that to be a risky situation where you are directly exposed. You may be asked, typically anybody that has a positive case or was directly exposed to an individual with COVID-19 will typically be told to isolate or quarantine for 14 days from the date of last exposure. And they do consider a ring. If you're too removed, if for example, Ms. Sherman had a positive lab test and Mr. Bratton was directly exposed for 15 minutes or more without a mask within 6 feet, and now he was around me and he doesn't know if he has it, I'm not considered directly exposed. I'm too removed from the case. Okay, so that's how the health department is addressing that, and they don't want to create panic with people. So I'll tell you right now, I've had employees that we've had to work through this summer and that have been exposed to people that have tested positive. We've had student athletes that have been exposed to somebody that tested positive that have had to stay home for 14 days from the date of last exposure. It's not always sometimes you don't know till 8 days later. Well, you may only have 6 more days that you have to isolate at that point if you don't show symptoms. If we have a positive case, that building may be sent into red or orange status immediately. So parents have to be flexible. We would go ahead.
So with one positive case, you're saying we would think about that, or we would?
The health department may,
Okay.
depending on the dynamics of the situation. Were they asymptomatic? Were they showing clear signs and symptoms? How many people were they exposed to? Was it just one classroom for an hour in the morning? Those types of things.
So basically, any positive case, because it will happen.
It's happening.
You already have it.
Yeah.
The health department would be the one that works through, shut it down.
I rely on them. I have on speed dial the director of nursing, the administrator for the Fairfield Department of Health, Larry Hanna. They have met with us on multiple occasions with the superintendents. Our understanding is that's how they will handle it, case by case. It's not time to create mass panic, but we may have to shut it down for a few days to clean and disinfect, and we may be able to get everybody else back at that point, but that student may have to stay home for 14 days. So I'm not going to go through all this. This will all be available. It's just kind of the cleaning and disinfecting and how long after we know that we have a case. We probably let the building sit for 24 hours. The virus isn't living as long on surfaces as they thought, so you let it sit. Then you come in and clean after that and disinfect. Sometimes you have to clean before you disinfect. Look through this.
One other question. So staff, so if I think about a teacher around directly exposed spouse, they've got to quarantine for 14 days.
Yeah.
We talked about it just earlier with substitutes. How are we thinking about substitutes, whether, I mean, I'm sure there'll be a shortage, real quick.
I can tell you this, let's say a staff member had to stay home because their spouse, partner, whoever is a COVID patient. There is FMLA emergency legislation. Travis might be able to talk to this a little bit better than I can, but there are 6 different reasons under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And the FMLA legislation is effective through December 31st of 2020. And families in those situations have access to sick leave, have access to FMLA leave. We may be flexible in that situation if we can potentially bring in a substitute to the classroom if the school is still in, but that teacher needs to stay home. The teacher may be able to possibly help work remotely with those students and with that substitute. So those are all things that we're gonna have to work through. We cannot find enough substitute teachers or bus drivers under normal conditions.
Yep.
So it's so difficult under these conditions. If anybody out there has a undergraduate degree and you want to go down to the Fairfield County Educational Service Center and sign up to be a substitute, if you're looking for work and you have an undergraduate degree in anything, you can become a substitute teacher. So I encourage you to do it. If you want to get your CDL and be a bus driver, the district will pay for your CDL. So those are all things that we are willing to do. Okay.
Sean, first of all, I want to thank you for putting all this together. I know it's been time consuming for you and it hasn't been easy, but the one thing that I want to point out to my fellow board members is, you know, Sean has the discretion. He can make that call, whatever, you know, color that we are on. It's his call to make if we do change colors in between the first couple ones. So obviously, I know, like you said, Sean, it's not going to be overnight or anything, but you do have that to be able to do it, your authority. So
I know this is hard to believe, but after we get done with 10C, I actually want to share a few more things before we talk about the status level. But any questions about the status levels of instructional delivery and the overall safety plan for the district? It's not going to be perfect. Schools are inherently designed to bring people together, not social distance. So there are clear challenges, but this is a tough decision for the board. Tough enough that 2 weeks ago, a week ago, I felt that it was clear. And now I don't feel it's clear. I'm not saying I have an opinion right now in favor one way or the other, and I can live with whatever the board decides. I think as a parent, children need to be in school. I think as a superintendent, we need to really consider the safety of our staff and all students in our decision and the current conditions. But this safety plan, there's disclaimers all over it that it will continue to evolve as the situation evolves, but I think it's a good starting point. And if there's not any more questions on the plan, I don't know if you want to try to get a motion on the plan or not.
I just want to comment too, I know you did say that this is, I know a ton of work went into this, your whole team, so pass on kudos, it's extremely thorough, well communicated, I think the community will be impressed, so thank you.
any other questions, concerns? All right, hearing none, I'll go ahead and make the motion. Motion made by Mr. Rod Johnson, second by Mr. Bratton. Mr. Bigham?
This is just C, correct?
Just
Yeah, this is
see.
C, yes, correct.
Mr. Rod Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sharon.
Yes.
Where's the addendum?
Yeah, so if you would all jump to the addendum, number 10D. Discussion of instructional status is identified in the Bloom Carroll Reset and Restart Education Safety Plan. So obviously, I think some things have changed over when we last had our planning meeting.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity, I think, for all of us to have an open discussion in regards to the status level when we open the 2020-2021 school year.
I just want to point out before the board engages in this discussion that obviously the instructional status levels are in the plan. We've talked about those. But what has happened is an agenda, my secretary is off on Fridays. right now, during the summer, she's taking some time off on Friday. So the board agenda sometimes is prepared almost a week in advance. And this is how fluid the situation is, that on Thursday around noon, the board agenda went out with recommendations. And by 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon, I get a notice, boom, level 3 for Fairfield County. And you see the data, and whether, again, you want to pick it apart or not play health professional and just have to go with what health professionals are saying, things have changed in a matter of a week and a half in Fairfield County. So, the county is under level 3. We did this addendum because I felt like, I could live with a lot of things, but we all know that any decision tonight will be criticized by many people, whether it's green, yellow, or red. It's going to be criticized, and there are pros and cons with each one. But I think as you look at the information, and we've gone through how the county got to level 3 and what it means, there are other things to look at too. And in the county, I shared this at the planning session, just to update the board. Since March 8th, there's been 706 cases of COVID-19. That's from March 8th through July 12th. There have been 17 deaths in the county. Currently, there are 302 active cases, which is one of the biggest increases. We saw an increase of 52 in the last day of active cases. And then there are 404 recovered cases in the county. So it's not that there's 706 active. There's 302 active, and there's 160,000 people that live in Fairfield County. That's about 0.16% of the county, roughly, right around 1.6%. So a lot of people have recovered. Some people didn't know that they have it. You can read all kinds of health information about children and how, whether they are truly transmitting this virus or not. You can see how it's impacting children. But, the Ohio Department of Health has key metrics that I think it's important to look at the data underneath the COVID dashboard, and we did this a couple weeks ago. And the key metrics are important to understand. The cases, you can see the ongoing amount of cumulative cases in Ohio, but you can also see what has been done recently with testing in Ohio. And here's a graph, a bar graph, on the key metrics of the Ohio Department of Health website. So you can see in the last couple weeks, June 27th here, moving in through July 7th, the number of tests being conducted every day. And I know people will say that, well, that's not the only reason why the cases are going up. But you will see that back here around June 7th, there were about 12,000 cases, or 12,000 tests being done a day, and that was the high point for quite a while. And you were getting about 300 or 400 positive cases a day under those testing guidelines. As you continue to move, more testing is being done. The high point of testing so far was July 10th, 23,000 cases, 23,000 tests were conducted. You can see the positivity rate has stayed around 6%, according to the Ohio Department of Health. So again, important to look at. I know they can say that the cases are not, or that the increase is not because more testing has happened. But if you're getting, if you're getting 1,000 cases a day at 24,000 tests, or you're getting 500 cases a day at 12,000 tests, it's roughly the same percent.
This is Ohio you're looking at.
This is the Ohio Department
State,
of Health.
not just our county.
Right. So just something to consider. And then another key metric that I want people to always pay attention to is the mortality rate. So if I look at this correctly, the mortality rate in Ohio for 0 to 19 years of age, there have been 2 mortalities since March, and this is as of July 13th. All right, about 53% are over 80 years old of the deaths, 25% obviously age 70 to 79, 14% of the mortality is age 60 to 69, and 6% age 50 to 59. So those two cases, I don't know about one of them, but the other case was a 19-year-old that was in a long-term care facility from Port Clinton or Ottawa County in Ohio that, again, was 19, that already had some existing health conditions and was in a long-term care facility. This is impacting children different than it's impacting people over 60 years old. If you look at those percentages, according to the state, 92% of the mortalities have been age 60 and over. 98% have been age 50 and over. So just something to keep in mind as you make a decision.
What's the average age of our staff?
The average, good question. So I've looked at that. I don't have the average age, but what I can tell you is out of 225 employees, we have about 20 that are over 60 years of age. Now, we have about 6 to 7 teachers that are over 60 years of age. Most of our people over age 60 are in our food service and in our maintenance department. The 4 individuals that I believe are over 60 in our maintenance department all work second shift. In the transportation department, we have a few drivers that would fall into 50, 60-year range, if I had to guess. Right now, I don't. But I looked at this because this is important to me. So, but the teachers, from an instructional standpoint, about six or 7. I can tell you that those that are considered our elder teachers, our average years of experience teaching in the district is 18 years, but our elder teachers are pretty active and pretty healthy. Doesn't mean they won't have concerns, and that we don't need to take, it means we still need to take precautions with everybody. But to put it in perspective, I wanted all of you to understand that. Something else to look at specifically is the Fairfield Department of Health. You can look by zip code. And if you look here at Greenfield Township, since March 8th, we've had 17 cases of COVID, positive cases in Greenfield Township since March. We've had this 43110 zip code includes all the way up near to 270, Madison Township, Bryce, Refugee Road, Gender Road, going over to Groveport, parts of Pickerington, north of Route 33 into Pickerington. So we have Bloom Township that has 43110 zip codes, but you can see there's 19 people in all that area that have positive cases, according to the Fairfield Department of Health. Doesn't mean they're active cases. That's how many people in those zip codes have tested positive since March. If you zero in, you can look at Lithopolis specifically in the 43136 zip code. We've had 11 cases. So what are we looking at? Like 45 cases in our Greenfield, Bloom, and Lithopolis zip codes of COVID-19. So just something to keep in mind. Again, 706 cases and 404 recovered, 17 deaths, and I believe they're all over 70 years old in Fairfield County. Am I leaving anything out? I'd like to hear, I guess, board discussion. The way this process will be done, Mr. Johnson will ask for a call for nominations of instructional levels. And I really want to stress that parents have asked for an answer. And I really think that's the only reason why we're providing an answer right now. We have 5 weeks until school starts. It's July 13th. We don't start with students until the 20th. Parents do need to be able to plan. I understand. I have a child that potentially could be home that's in 5th grade when my wife works and I work. That's a huge concern for me. But I also understand that we have a responsibility to 2,000 students, 225 staff members, to try to educate students, keep them engaged in learning, and try to keep them safe. So it's a huge challenge, but the way this will be decided, if there's a decision made, there will be a call for nominations after discussion, and it could be 1 status level, it could be 2, depending on what board members decide to do. And then at that point, they would close the nominations for an instructional status level, and you would move on to the next section where when you vote for one of the 2 or 3 or 4 status levels that I expect may be nominated, you will actually vote for a color, and it takes at least 3 votes of that instructional status color to carry board action. At that point, I will communicate, because I know how social media will blow up. I've prepared multiple scenarios. All right? So I will try to get it out as quickly as I can to stay ahead of all the parents on social media that want to miscommunicate or bash or whatever it might be. So I have different options ready to go if a decision is made tonight. But the intent is to allow parents the time to plan for something. And we can talk about the benefits of each one, but what every parent has to hear and understand is that any decision is made by the Board of Education is still contingent upon the conditions when school starts 5 weeks from now. It may be a lot better, it may be a lot worse, and it may need to change after guidance from health officials, and I have to communicate that 3 days or 5 days or 7 days before school. So what I want parents to hear loud and clear and staff to hear loud and clear is that they better plan on red, yellow, and green this year, because I think it'll happen. I hope I'm wrong, but I want to make sure that people know that we're trying to make a decision to help people plan, and we have options within these plans to try to appease and serve everybody. But no option is good right now. So thanks to the board for what you do. It's tough. I had a recommendation on there last week, but at this point, I didn't know what the weekend would look like. I didn't know what Monday would look like, because it changes that quickly. So this is a process we're going to use, and it can still change in the future.
So it's a bit clear, if we make a decision tonight, 3 weeks from now, you can change that law.
I can, but there's benefits to different things, and I want you guys to start talking about those, and I'll give you some thought too.
Yeah, I'll start off first. I think when you look at everything, we all know how we felt when we left here, our last planning session. But overall, we weigh the pros and cons of this, but more importantly, I look at it from a planning perspective for parents. One of the colors, obviously, that allows parents to plan. Worst case scenario, I personally, I'm not a health expert or anything like that, but at the end of the day, I'd rather be safe than sorry. And with 5 weeks still out there, and especially the letter that came down today from Fairfield Department of Health, if we fall in true line for what's out there and we follow, health officials, experts, I think it calls for yellow now. I think it gives the opportunity for parents to plan personally. And like you said, 3 weeks from now, we can fall back on level 2. We can actually, come back and we can go to green. But I'd rather be able to give parents an opportunity to prepare than, go yellow 2 weeks before and then everyone's scrambling. But to Sean's point, I agree. I think everybody should plan for those 3 colors throughout the year and how they will go about doing that with our children. Personally, for me, this is a hard deal. As a parent, I want my kids there 5 days a week. But, when I look at this and I look at, what health departments, the guidance we're getting from the health department, for example, I want to be safe and sorry personally.
Not only the parents, I think it helps the teachers too, going every other day. If we would have to go into red, they could already have some sort of a plan for the students being home. Have something and set at that point. I know they need a plan if we ever did go red, but I'm like you. We'd like to see everybody in school, but it's safe than sorry, for sure.
So I guess this has been an interesting, ride in terms of Mr. Hunt's point earlier, Friday, I think we were all ready to go 5 days a week, right? Yeah. Until we hit the red. You read, again, the guidelines, which again came out today, right? So we just learned about it 2 hours before this meeting. From the health department. The health department says, if I were to follow this to a T, the health department says you should be going yellow, blended learning, right? I think blended learning also adds to what Mr. Johnson, Mr. Jim, let's just say they both spoke out, said is it allows, to your point earlier, Mr. Hunt, no one has come back to school yet to wear masks. We're suggesting masks strongly, right? No one's worn them. I can tell you I have 3 kids. They all said, yeah, I would love to come back to school. I'll wear a mask. I'll do whatever I need to do. But it's different when you wear it for 6 hours a day. I wore one last night. I went to a work function I had to do. I was in it for 8 hours. I'm not used to it.
Yeah.
And it took a while to get used to. And even today, I'm fidgeting with it more. So I think that allows for kids a day, and then a day off. I think it also allows for preparation. Again, the teachers, the administrators, no one's done this yet and has not come back to this. So cutting that number in half, I think only helps. It helps from a health obviously the health professionals are saying, limit the number of people in your buildings. I think that's what the kind of yellow status is doing. That doesn't mean, to Mr. Holland's point earlier, and again, from a planning perspective as a parent, I'd rather be thinking about yellow than thinking about green and then going yellow or red 1 week before school starts. Now I can't plan, now I can't think about it. I think we all know what red looks like, right?
We've done it, yeah.
We just spent 9 weeks doing red. And history would tell you we all know what green looks like. That's what I think we all want. Although green even today with the increased protocols is different. So if I think about kindergartners, what do we do for kindergartners when they start? Do they all start on the same day, same time?
No, in our communication, it says grades 1 through 12 starts on these dates. We're doing kindergarten screenings the first few days, and we will have, in our messages, we have information that staggered start for kindergarten is still on the 27th and 28th, and that the primary school will contact you after your screening to let you know when your kindergarten child gets into school.
Why do we stagger start kindergarten?
Well, because we don't want it to be overwhelming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say we're in a global pandemic. How many of our kids have gone through a pandemic?
How many of us?
None of, in this, you could argue that. So I guess that's where my head is in terms of, it gets everybody acclimated. And again, if we're asked to make a call today, I think that's really, that's kind of where I'm from.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. What's the parental feedback you've received? I was hoping we'd hear from more parents tonight to help drive.
I'll tell you
But you
this.
see all the
It was,
communications that come to you.
when I did the survey, I did it because I knew that parents would want to know by mid-July what in the world we're doing. It's a month before school. So I did it in early June and left it open for a couple weeks, had 600 responses. We have about 1,100 parents. And at that time, it was overwhelming. And I, as a parent and a superintendent, felt like, you know what, we're headed in the right direction. We're going to open up school on green 5 days a week with safety precautions. The parents support it. We may have an online option. As we worked through that, we decided we would still provide an online option if we go green. So there's a lot of good things about green, but the parents, I would say I haven't heard from too many in the past week saying you got to go green. But there are still a lot out there that want to do that, and I understand what their feedback said in early June, but things have changed in the last week and a half, and there's just a lot to think about now, and I think some parents are getting a little apprehensive. I have had a few contact me to say, I think we should go online, or will there be an option for online? I don't feel comfortable going under green and everybody in the building. Honestly, probably 3 or 4 phone calls or emails.
Compared to what?
Compared to 90% of the people that contact me were before a week ago, were 5 days a week. You got to get us back in school.
But even at the height, back at the end of May, when we had just come off this pandemic, it was about 7% of people in this district. So they didn't feel comfortable.
17%.
17.
Yeah.
On that second graph, though, wasn't it, when you chose the first choice, it was a little lower than that, right?
No, those are just the total number of, people that selected those as a second or third choice.
I thought the second one, if they were to choose online.
Right here, the
that
question
lower.
was, as a parent, do you feel comfortable sending your children to school with safety precautions this fall? 611 responses, 81.8% said yes, 18% said no. Then, these aren't percentages. These are the number of people, 423 people picked normal schedule with safety precautions as their first choice. Okay, and then the second most preferred choice, can't see the number, but I can tell you it's about on this graph, it's about 350 people picked as their second choice, Monday, Wednesday, every other Friday in person. All right, and then here you can see about 290 people picked Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, every other Friday online as their third choice. Their fourth choice, 404 people said their least preferred choice is all online. So it was clear back then that they want to go to school 5 days a week with safety precautions. There's just a lot to consider. And I think that the risks are high with that. As a parent, I would personally send my children to school under those conditions. But putting 23, 24, 25 students in a classroom to start off school with the mask and all the procedures that we're going to be implementing could be a challenge. There are, it helps parents. Does it help the economy? Yes. Will some people say it's irresponsible? Probably. But we also have an online option for those that don't feel comfortable doing that. But if we're trying to look at what is the way to, if we got to make it, we're making a decision based on data today. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what it's going to look like on August 20th. So if we're making a decision based on data today, based upon the guidance, they're not mandates, based upon guidance from the health department. They're leaving this to local control, to a school board, to a superintendent, to determine what's right for their community. And there's a process in order to do that. But, will we have some staff concerns? Yeah, I've met with some staff, but it was a lot of, overall we have a young staff, and they're eager and they're excited. But there will be those that are concerned, and I just think that some people could say it might be irresponsible based on today. If you could tell me that we're going to be going down and things are going to be settling in August and you pick green, that makes sense. I could walk out of here tonight, whatever the board feels, green, yellow. I wouldn't feel good about red right now. That's my opinion. I wouldn't feel good about red at all. If the board decides green or red, I can live with it. We're going to be criticized. People are going to say we might be irresponsible, but if they feel that way, you have an online option. So you have a choice if you can go to restaurants. You have a choice if you want to go into stores. As a superintendent, I think to protect the health and safety of our students and staff and to ease into the school year based upon the data right now, yellow is attractive because if I'm a teacher and I have 12 kids in my class and I'm working through all the challenges, it's a lot easier to do that. I can tell you, Franklin County, Pickaway County, and almost every school, there's a couple schools in Fairfield County still on the fence trying to decide. Their boards are split. This is a tough issue. And there are some schools, maybe a little bit farther south in the southern part of the county where that have even fewer cases, different culture, where they may feel very comfortable going back under green right now. But, I think if we're listening to health officials, I think we have to have an option to look at yellow. And, the bad thing about yellow is it's still only 50% of the time instructionally. Parents still have very difficult schedules. We have teachers that they're going to be here every day, but their child that may attend school somewhere on an alternating day or even Bloom Carroll might be at home. So how does a teacher work that? Is that going to impact staff attendance? Are teachers going to get sick at a certain point where I can't find substitutes and now I got to close schools because of teacher illness and I don't have enough supervision? These are all things that I think.
And I think that I really struggle with this as an educator.
Yeah.
Not even necessarily as a parent. I struggle more of it as an educator because I feel like if I had teacher feedback, if there was some kind of a survey that went out to teachers or something, I think that would help us be more informed about their concerns. And to Jimmy's point, that teachers will have the time to prepare. My guess is our teachers are going to be ready. If I know teachers at all, they've already got in their head what yellow, red, and green look like in their classrooms. My guess is they've already kind of mapped that out just by the nature of being a teacher, that you want to plan. It's called a lesson plan. You want to plan. So my guess is they're already prepared. I think it's really smart to let parents know they should be prepared for all of them. So yeah, they wanna know, are we going red, green, or yellow tomorrow? And we're gonna tell them, hopefully, this is what we're planning, but you should absolutely make plans for yellow and red.
You know, I would, right now, the conditions are so crazy. I'd love to not make a decision,
But the community wants.
but the community wants a decision. So if they want a decision, are we making a decision with a crystal ball or where we are today? And are we communicating that these conditions can change all the time?
Well, and that's why I
We
struggle
may,
with
we may,
yellow.
we may drop to level 2 and hey, we might be able to consider going green.
But I struggle with yellow because you're gonna have a teacher there who's exposed to all the students at some point. So, you know, and my kid would be exposed to 15 kids as opposed to 30. I mean, the
Yeah,
exposure.
not every
with it.
teacher will be directly exposed. If you have a case in a classroom, most of the staff may not be directly exposed according to the health department. So you may have, even on yellow, you may have a group that would have to stay home or be shut down. We may, with the way our buildings are, we would probably shut the entire building down for disinfecting and cleaning. Talk to the health department. They would be okay with the other group continuing to go. I've thought through this and there's not a good answer, but we wouldn't start group 1, we wouldn't bring in every day now because the other group is quarantined and the other group is all online. We would stay on a schedule. We would stay on a schedule just for consistency.
But I also struggle with the fact that at this point, OHSSA has planned to go full bore sports.
They have a meeting on the 16th and you can see what's happening at the collegiate level
Right.
now.
But I mean, at this point, based on the last article I read about it, you know, that was, everyone's intention is to go. So if we, at this point, you know, we're practicing.
Yeah, but with athletics, again, just like if you got volleyball practice, you got 12 girls on a team, you can spread them out more, you can social distance more. The athletic teams that are practicing outside, you can social distance more. And I think that's why the Department of Health allowed individual skills training, and even now, they're allowing scrimmaging and competition intra-squad. So I think that they're looking at how can they make sports continue. And yeah, even if we were on
It's just
yellow.
contradictory. I mean, they're out there with no mask, and then yet we gotta sit kindergarten with masks. It's just so much information out there is contradictory.
It is, and that's where, you know.
And that's where I struggle, and that's why at the planning meeting, I made it very important to me that we needed to have an option for families that weren't comfortable.
Mhm.
At that planning meeting, we did not have an option, and now we do.
We were going to handle it internally with all of our curriculum that we've
Right.
already purchased.
The way I understood it was you either come to school the way we say, like if we were gonna go green, and there were families that were either high risk or whatever, they would have to they would just have to find another option. But now we're giving them another
Well,
option.
we would be providing them with we would be serving them through, just like any student that's absent. If there's a student absent for
Right.
3 days, we educate that student. We provide resources that we have here at school. It's not the quality that you have in the classroom, but the teacher is still providing lessons. And we felt through Google Classroom, Schoology in grades 5 to 12, that we could still, in our Pearson online math, in our ELA and Journeys, Study Sync curriculum, and all the extra programs for intervention and support, Lexia, Success Maker, that we could provide enough resources to keep those students engaged with lessons. But it was honestly probably a little bit more of a management issue even doing that than it is just having a resource built in like we
I think the
do.
remote plan you have is very helpful for teachers.
I wanted to follow up. You mentioned something about teachers and that they're going to be ready to do anything. I think they will, but we're also providing a option. We can't pay them right now this summer, but we will make it available that if they want to come in late July or early August, that they can voluntarily come in. We will provide professional development with the Virtual Learning Academy curriculum. The individual that services our area would be here working with our curriculum director on that process. And then we would also be providing, we already have it scheduled, assuming that the board was going to approve that tonight, that we will provide professional development on August 17th and 18th for VLA and for Google Classroom. And we will do it again on September 28th when we have a professional development day as well. So we will be supporting our teachers with PD that they can implement under red or green, red or
And to
yellow.
be clear, I didn't expect teachers to do that. I just know the nature of teachers.
Yeah.
You know, they're always excited about learning, so they're up for the challenge, I think, to be in all these levels. So I just feel that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would have liked to know what they thought.
I was thinking we would have a few more here, or if they wanted to speak, just.
Well, yeah, I'll be honest. So what happens is you get to the end of the school year and a lot of parents and a lot of staff thought, hey, things are going to be, this was a once in a lifetime. We're going to be back to normal in August. Well, again, when parents need an answer in July and it's early June, you can't wait a week, 2 weeks for people to get back from vacation and coordinate things, and decisions have to be made. But representatives have been talked to. I can't talk to all 225 staff members individually, okay? So.
Did you hear from some? Did some email
Yes,
you or-
I've sat down with a choir teacher in my office because kids on choir risers singing or in band playing instruments, those are concerns. We've thought about those. I've talked to a few different teachers as well. I've talked to directors, supervisors in food service, special education, transportation, maintenance, building principals. Met with these people multiple times to go over plans, met with superintendents across the state, in the county, in central Ohio. You guys are going to find out in the next few days, every school district has almost the same plan. Okay, so there were some that kind of modeled it for others and came up with things, but all school districts are looking at 3 options. Very few will only have 2 options. There are a few districts that are either red or green, all in or all online, and they don't even want to consider an alternating hybrid schedule. I don't know what it really hurts to have that as an option, because again, as Mr. Bratton has pointed out, every parent knows what green is when your kid goes to school 5 days a week, and we know what red is now. The parents haven't had time to plan and prepare for this yellow alternating schedule. If they have to plan and prepare for the next month for an alternating schedule, you can always move to green if things get better. But to go from green, to tell the community now we're going green, I would walk out of here feeling good, like that's right, kids need to be in school. But I also have concerns of, are you being irresponsible? Are you definitely taking concerns of all your students and all your staff, just not your child and what you want? We know it's better for kids. The American Academy of Pediatrics, they've been vocal about that schools should consider the benefits of being in school and in-person instruction, and how that outweighs the risk or minimal compared to being out of school forever online. So it's important. Those are health professionals. Doctors feel that kids need to be in school, but you should also take some precautions and consider your local conditions. In Fairfield County right now, if you look at Ohio, it is apparently showing an increase in COVID spread to a point of concern. So if you go green, are you irresponsible? Or do you just say, that's what we're doing, and we got an option? Or if you go yellow, you make nobody happy, but it also allows, at least it gets the kids back in school some. It's easier for the teachers to manage to start off. Maybe you start the first 6 days, maybe you start the first 3 weeks, and then things are getting better, and can you transition after Labor Day to a green schedule? And can you hopefully stay on that with the precautions people are taking throughout your county? So things to consider. I think just because you make a decision now doesn't mean it's going to be the decision on August 20th. And whatever we're doing on August 20th may not be what we're doing after Labor Day or at Fair Break or in November or February.
Are you done, Jim? I agree with you 100% as far as this decision. I mean, we've all thought about it for a month, longer than that. We were under the impression we were going back to school. As a parent of 2 daughters, I'm 100% all in. Send them to school. I'll worry about the 2 kids. As a board member, I don't know that I can say, send these 2,000 kids to school, send these 225 employees, lunch ladies, bus drivers, janitors, teachers, principals. I don't know that I can do that and feel good. If it was just my 2 kids, I feel good about it. So in my opinion, I feel like if we plan for yellow, plan for the worst, hopefully that's the worst. It probably won't be, but if we plan for that right now, it gives the parents who do have a issue with childcare 6 weeks to kind of get something set up. 2-3 weeks from now, our level decreases and we're able to go green. We can go green. It's not something like Mr. Hahn said earlier, we're going to put off for a month. you know, if we've got the opportunity to go green, we can do it in a couple days with a few days' notice. So, also, and I'm not sure who said it, might have been Mr. Johnson, I feel like with yellow, it's kind of a happy medium. If it gets worse, we're already halfway there. I mean, we've kind of done some training. But one of the things that really concerns me is the kids, my daughter's a freshman, as far as her going back to school, being off school for 6 weeks or 6 months by the time we start, I don't really know that it's going to affect her going back to school. I think she'll be fine. But my 4th grader, I am concerned about. Like, I'm not an educator. I'm a business owner. What does this, as far as the stress level, what does this do to a child that's in 2nd or 3rd grade, 1st grade, going back and seeing their teachers wear masks 5 days a week, just like it was back in March?
Yeah, you wonder about the benefits. I mean, the attachment to parents that they've had.
Right.
And if the alternating day eases them back in just at some point.
And to me, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, I just, when I look at it, for my 2 children, one of them, I think, center back, she's going to be fine. My younger one, I think, wow, a soft start would really help. And hopefully that's what it would be, a soft start. 3 weeks in, Labor Day, November, whatever. Hopefully get through the worst of it, if it gets any worse, and allow them to come back gradually. But as far as a business owner, we've worked through. I mean, we haven't taken any time off, so I'm really on both sides of the fence. It just I don't know that I would feel happy, and I know people's going to be mad. People's going to say, "I can't believe you voted this way or that way." I just. When you take the kids and look at what it's going to do to them, and really, if we would do a soft start, is it really going to hurt the kids long term?
Yeah, the one thing I worry about long term is, this spring, I don't want to say we lost that quarter, but what maybe wasn't as effective as what we would have with in-person instruction. And the instructional focus, I mean, if we only have kids in person for 88 days compared to 176, we really have to instructionally look at the power standards. We have to do a lot of pre-assessments, but we have to move rapidly, and we cannot teach all the content in a course or all the standards in a year. It's going to be impossible. We have to identify, do some remediation, some interventions, some pre-assessments to find out where our students are after missing the 4th quarter, per se, and then focus on getting them caught up, but also identifying on our curriculum maps and on our pacing charts what standards are important. State testing did not take place this past year. I'm confident it will not take place again this year. There's a bill to waive all state testing. We can't afford to lose 2 weeks to state testing at some grade levels. We need to be able to teach the testing. I think Ohio, this might be a good wake-up call, that it's important to know how Ohio students are doing, but the most important thing is getting kids in school and teaching them. And the testing will probably go on the back seat, and I hope that this sets a precedent that it becomes less important in Ohio, and especially at the younger grade levels. But I think from an instructional focus, I'm concerned about red, I'm concerned about yellow, and the lack of in-person instruction. Again, I could walk out of here saying I support the board supported the district and me. Whether it's green or yellow, I can't imagine, in my opinion, if anybody here is considering red right now. But I think the debate is the yellow and the green, and we're going to be criticized with either one. It's inconvenient for yellow, but it might be the smartest decision based upon guidance from health officials. Some counties are aligning their levels for their schools. Maybe in Pickaway County, they're drawing a stronger connection. Our county is leaving a little bit of leeway because you'll have a Pickerington and a Lancaster, but you'll have a Bern Union or a Bloom Carroll that may be totally different than those communities.
When you're looking at that, you just showed us the map, we're very different.
We are.
We're very different, we're a very rural community, we're small.
Yeah.
Our job's to educate kids.
And my feedback to the health department was I didn't want locked in. I didn't want to be told that at level 3, I always have to be hybrid. because I think you really have to look at your local community and decide what's best. But Franklin County and the suburban schools in Southwest City and Columbus are gonna be pretty much locked in to their City of Columbus and the Franklin County Health Department, telling them when they have to operate, or how they have to operate, depending on the level.
I think you bring up a good point about the kids needing remediation. We have to play catch up. Don't we want them here?
We have to play catch up, and we only have half the time with them in person. It's
That's
gonna
why,
be,
I think that's a reason to maybe, let's revisit Green and talk about that let's get them back, let's start that remediation. How are teachers even gonna be able to assess that if they haven't seen that?
and I think, when I say that, I don't wanna be maybe misunderstood, but when I say that, I think we really have to prioritize and say, the time we have with students to teach them is important. And yes, we have to know where they are. We can't just, if you had a third grader last year, we just can't jump into the fourth grade curriculum. We need to do some pre-assessing and see what from third grade do we need to revisit that typically we teach in the fourth quarter that they had to learn online. And then we got to identify from that point on what's important in fourth grade for Ohio standards and identify which of those standards are important to teach. We're not going to be able to get to everything. And I don't want our teachers to feel the stress of that, especially when state testing won't happen or student or teacher evaluations will not be tied to state testing results for their cohort of students. So I think the most important thing is to try to get kids here safely and do the best we can with them. And, but the conditions right now, I think, would support yellow more than green as of today. A week ago, I felt like the conditions and the feedback was definitely to go green, but I don't know if that would be the great start to the year based upon what we're dealing with today, based upon the numbers we're dealing with and where this virus is headed for our county and for our state right now. So.
This would have been a lot easier if you would have just give us no recommendation.
Well, I was ready to go, but then 3 hours later, the county moved to this level 3 and it kind of threw things for a loop. And like today, here I am, they moved to level 3, and then today I get, about 2 hours before this meeting, I had to bring a handout telling you what the health department is saying under each level. Tomorrow I'll get something else. So
Now, is it an option, and I'm just kind of throwing it out there, for like the high school to go all every day? And then have a soft opening for the younger students, so it's not a big hit on them. The high school is a little bit more mature, they wear the mask, social distancing. We really need them to not fall behind on their lessons, to move on to college and so forth, where the younger students would have that soft every other day. I know where I could see that might come in effect is the older child might be their sitter for the younger ones.
yeah, it could.
But
No, it's a good thought. It's a good idea. I think it could be a challenge, communication, understanding what's going on. High school kids can manage better online with the learning management system of Schoology. You'll see some districts that are just putting their high school kids online. I personally disagree with that. I think high school kids need to be in session too, just as much as other kids for the structure and in their lives. But you could operate from the get-go with buildings under different levels, but
like the status orange, one building's closed, but the other ones are open.
yeah, I mean, you could. I just think, here's the other thing. We transport our middle school and high school kids together, so we wouldn't be, the routes that are most crowded, that we're transporting 8 grade levels, grades 5 through 8, are your middle school, high school. And now, some juniors and seniors drive. You'd be surprised at the number of kids that don't get their driver's license at 16 anymore and still ride a bus. So we wouldn't be able to effectively social distance. I think the purpose of yellow is to increase social distancing on the buses and in the classrooms. And we wouldn't really be doing that at the middle school, high school level. Our elementary routes are a lot better in terms of route numbers. A lot of our elementary routes will have 30 or 40 students on a bus route.
Is busing the main concern? Because
It's a concern, and then in the classrooms, I mean, go to our modulars. I mean,
I'm talking, what,
yeah, go to our
saying
mo-
6 through 12. Or it would be
5 through 12. Yeah, we have at the primary school, you know, our current load count, and some of these parents won't put their children on these buses, but again, 24 or 26 seats, we have 34 students on a bus, 34, 48, 32, 37, 26, 65. There's some high density areas. At the intermediate school, I'm sorry, that was the intermediate school. At the primary, we have bus routes of 29, 38, 36, 49, 29, 70, 38, 33. So we can social distance on buses a lot better with our younger students. At the high school level, it's a whole different beast. Load counts, you're looking at 68, 63, 65, 72, 71, 65, 75, 79, 57, 70, 62, 58, 51, 73, 51.
What was the
That's
wall,
the high
9 through 12?
K through 8.
Yeah,
We
I'll
have
be
to
honest,
bring-
if we have school in session, in my opinion, we need to continue. I know by law, you don't have to transport students in grades 9 through 12. And you only have to transport students in grades K to 8 that live outside of 2 miles. But if we don't transport, there will be students that don't get to school. And that's totally defeats what I think we're trying to accomplish. So, I mean, I think we will have different buildings under orange at some point, but our middle school and high school and our staff interact so much. We share a lot of foreign language teachers, ag, consumer science, Spanish, French teachers between the middle school and high school. I guess I would hate to see, you know, high school kids every day, middle school kids every other day. It's a possibility, but now it's creating a lot of havoc for those families that we're trying to keep a consistent schedule for, and that they do depend on their older children to help with some of their middle school ones. Just thinking, well, I mean, it's obvious. I have, for example, as I said that way, I didn't realize it, but I have a high school child, a sophomore, and I have a 7th grader, and I have a 5th grader. So if my high school child's home and my wife and I are working, I feel better about my 5th grader being home, and then if I can get home at 4 or 5 o'clock and sit down and do school, then I'll feel better. If I don't have a high schooler at home with my child, well, either my wife or I will go on family medical leave because we've got to be home.
I think what Mr. Johnson was saying is.
Yeah,
K
but that's an
four,
example,
right?
that's an example.
K4 soft start. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
If you're trying to ease little ones into it with the mask, a lot more instruction on how to act, that kind of thing. It's not a bad idea.
You will see the Franklin County schools, most of them, a lot of them put out their messages even June 28th, 29th, hey, we're going back 5 days a week, and I was about there ready to do that, but I waited, and they've all had to shift. A lot of them were green. Hilliard, Pickerington had communicated that they were green 5 days a week. They've had to turn around. They're having the same meetings we are in the next couple of days. The other schools in the county are having the same meetings and then making a decision. I think everybody in the county, I'm not announcing plans for other school districts tonight, but I can tell you there's one that might go green, but they're probably going to be yellow. The rest of them are yellow. There was under the conditions today, and based on guidance from the health department. We still have to social distance in high school classes. If we're under level 3, we still have to try to find ways to protect our high school staff and high school students, and based upon the guidance that we've received. We don't have to, but it's strongly recommended. So I'm not sure how much more.
Any other questions, comments? All right, jumping back to the agenda, under 10D1, at this time, we'll do call for nominations in the instructional status levels, green, yellow, orange, or red, as identified in the BC Reset and Restart Education Safety Plan to be implemented at the start of 2020-2021 school year.
Get a call for nominations.
If I may I get a call for nominations, please?
Call for yellow.
Call for yellow.
Call for yellow.
Mr. Bratton. Oh, it's already been done.
Done, yeah.
We'll vote after this.
Is there a call for any other colors?
I'm struggling, I'm gonna call for green.
I think any of us are gonna call for red.
What's that?
I don't think any of us are gonna call for red.
No nominations for Ray? Not yet, not yet anyway.
Hearing no other colors nominated, I will go ahead and make the motion.
To close.
Close.
Johnson,
Mr. Bratton, did you second?
Yes.
this is a yes/no vote.
Yep.
To close.
Mr. Bigham, the motion was made by Mr. Rod Johnson, seconded by Mr. Bratton. Roll call, please.
Mr. Rod Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman.
Yes.
Okay. At this time, Mr. Bigham, will you do a roll call for the options of green or yellow?
Yes, we'll go in alphabetical order. Mr. Abbott,
Super difficult decision, but I'm going with yellow.
Mr. Bratton,
Agreed, very challenging. I think I have a hard time at this particular point in time to, I think, go completely against what our health officials are recommending. So I'm voting yellow.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
I feel the same way. It's a tough call. I can see both ways, green and yellow. But I just keep falling back. I would hate for this board to go green and we have a lot of cases or something would happen with any of our students or teachers, staff members or anything. I see the charts, I see the numbers, but with what the health department's released and so forth, I'm going to have to go with yellow tonight.
Mr. Rod Johnson,
Yeah, I concur with everything everybody said. This isn't an easy decision by far. I mean, I've contemplated both of these colors. At this time, just looking at if we're gonna practice social distancing within the classroom and on the buses as well, I'm gonna have to go with yellow.
Mrs. Sherman,
I struggle with this as an educator and looking at the data that you just showed us tonight. I just feel like kids should be in school. I'm gonna go green.
Get a majority of the item to read the item if you will.
So under 10D2, I will read the agenda item. Approve the opening of the 2020-2021 school year as scheduled, implementing the yellow instructional status level for the BC Reset and Restart Education Safety Plan and contingent upon pandemic conditions, guidance and orders of public health officials, and at the discretion of the superintendent.
All right, so we can move on to E-Rod.
Moving back to our original agenda. Approve the BCLSD 2020-2021 remote learning plan pursuant to House Bill 164 to be implemented in the event of a building or district closure. Sean, you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Briefly, it's our families are familiar with it. We've had to make some revisions to the remote learning plan. The remote learning plan would be available if we are completely shut down or a building is shut down. Our teachers would deliver instruction remotely. Again, the yellow, orange, or red could result in a remote learning plan being implemented. By implementing this plan in declaring that we have a remote learning plan, my understanding from the Department of Education is that we would be exempt from the 910-hour requirement for grades K to 6 and the 1,001 hours for grades 7 through 12. that are required. So obviously, if a building was shut down and we started to fall behind on instructional hours, the school districts are exempt and are expected to either provide remote learning or a blended learning plan to the state. There are expectations for remote learning that we had time to put in place for teachers, for district leaders, for students, for families. Remote learning obviously is primarily done online, but it doesn't have to be. We would use Google Classroom and Schoology to communicate with grades K to 4 would be Google Classroom, and grades 5 to 12 would use Schoology or Google Classroom. There would be expectations for lessons, attendance, and grading. A little bit more expectation in terms of trying to interact remotely or virtually daily with your students, having hours during your workday to interact virtually for students. And I think a lot more people are comfortable now using Google Meet and Zoom to do that. There is an expectation that our grading period or grading scale would still be applied, that students are expected to work daily, that students are to have lessons daily, or at least lessons spanning multiple days to keep working on. And it just kind of talks about how we will communicate if we were all remote. Students having access, how they log in to access their different online programs, how we would handle students that do not have an electronic device and how they would obtain one from the school district. If they don't have internet access, how they could do that here. Resources to find affordable internet. There's a lot of internet companies providing some services at reduced cost in certain areas, so that resource is provided to families. How they would receive lunches, and if we were in an all remote learning or even on a yellow schedule, how students will have lunches distributed to them for the day that they're not in session, to take home with them, or pick up, or if they don't have transportation, how we will get them their lunch if they are on lunch assistance. And then there's some resources. So basically, what we did in the spring, the state's requiring that you submit that plan to the state, and a lot of things would be similar, but there would be more expectation for meeting options during the week with teachers, virtual interactions, office hours, virtually in groups. There's been upgrades to virtual meeting software and programs that allow you to group students. You can, in Google Meet now, you could group 4 or 5 students together, and they could have a session where they're working on an assignment, and another group has another 4 or 5 people in a virtual session, and the teacher can interact with all of them. So you can still do some collaborative small group work, but those are some of the things about the remote learning plan. So,
Any questions from Mr. Hahn?
Quick question on that. That's only if it's red, or if the building shut?
Red, or if a building is shut, and orange. Yeah, if we had to go all remote.
I know there was some concern about maybe teachers at work if kids are home. Is that not an option?
Right. No, if they're obviously, if we're under yellow
It's all
and the
right.
teachers are teaching here, I mean, there will have kids that will be in VLA that are never coming to school under
Right.
green or yellow, and they're accessing VLA in a remote, from a remote learning standpoint. So the online students that are choose all online, or their families, will be using Virtual Learning Academy. Our teachers, if we go to red or orange, could use Virtual Learning Academy for some of their lessons, but they don't have to. They can teach in remote ways through, again, the YouTube, the Google, the Schoology, all the different applications that we use to interact in the spring. They could continue to do that with their resources that they have, like I talked about with our math, ELA.
I just had a community member come to me and say, if the kids have to be home, is there an option for the teachers to still come to work? So
Yeah.
ask me that. So it will be all remote.
This is for all remote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Hahn? I will go ahead and make the motion. Second. Motion made by Mr. Rod Johnson, seconded by Mr. Jimmy Johnson. Mr. Bigham?
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
All right. Number 11, board reports and information. A, Board of Education liaison updates. Facility management, Mr. Abbott, would you like to add anything to what Mr. Hahn already said?
I have nothing further to report. We're
Yeah.
on schedule and things are going good.
The next progress meeting is, it's on the 23rd. It's on the 23rd of, it's a Thursday, and it'll be at the site in the trailer.
And we should be back to schedule. Personnel, labor and management, Mr. Bratton, Mr. Jimmy Johnson.
Nothing new at this time.
OSB representative, Mrs. Sherman. We get plenty of emails, but
Yeah.
we don't know what's going on. Policy, Mr. Abbott, Mrs. Sherman.
Just those two of it.
Number 5, safety, health and wellness, Mr. Abbott, Mr. Jimmy Johnson.
Nothing that we haven't
Haven't
discussed for the last
discussed.
2 hours.
I'm meeting with the school nurses tomorrow
It's tomorrow.
at 1 to go over some things with them in the health department.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing it remotely.
Number 6, finance, Mr. Bratton. Next time. All right, great. B, upcoming PTO, Booster Board of Education meetings, July 29th, the Board of Education planning meeting, here in the Blue Girl Middle School Library. And then went on August the 10th, the Board of Education regular meeting. Any questions in regards to those 2 meetings? You'll be out of town, correct? Okay.
And we'll see
For which one?
29th.
if there's, I mean, if there's nothing changing and we're thinking that we're staying in yellow, we may not need the July 29th planning session. If we have some more things to talk about like this, then we may have to hold it, but the board needs to cancel that, a few days ahead of time. We can get that notice out to the media.
Perfect. All right, number 12, adjourn. May I get a motion, please?
Motion, so moved. Thank you.
Who made it? Was it?
I did.
Mr. Bratton. Motion made by Mrs. Sherman, seconded by Mr. Bratton. Mr. Bigham?
Mrs. Sherman,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson.
Yes. Time is 9:01.